And out in the Pacific, we now have Tropical Depression 1E, a couple hundred miles off the Mexican coast, the first tropical depression of the year. This will become Tropical Storm Alvin soon as it gets more organized and more intense. We'll get you updated on what could very soon be the first named storm of the year. And the Atlantic season looms. It'll be here on Sunday. We're reflecting on lessons learned from years past and looking ahead to what we can expect in the new season. We're taking you to Cedar Key, Florida, where they're rebuilding after being slammed by 3 hurricanes in just 13 months. That's all right now on Fox Weather Now. There it is, Tropical Depression 1E. We had said it 1 because it's the very first of the season in either basin, Pacific or Atlantic. The E stands for Eastern Pacific, so it's the designator that the National Hurricane Center uses, so we know where this thing is. 5 p.m. advisory, first one of these issued this year by the National Hurricane Center. Winds are at 35 miles per hour, so basically the National Hurricane Center has told us the structure is there. By definition, they're comfortable calling this a tropical system, a tropical depression. Any stronger, now that the structure is there, this will be considered a tropical storm once that gets bumped up to 40 miles per hour. If you've been with us, we were talking about this general envelope and how it had consolidated some. It appeared as though this had gotten better organized over the past 6 to 12 hours. And right in through there, I'm wondering if that's what did it. There's this new, even now, some new thunderstorms erupting, and they're banding something like that. There are some curved bands. That's probably where they're calling that low-level center, and it's probably, seeing that on satellite, one of the reasons that they went ahead and bumped this up to a tropical depression, or at least acknowledged that the structure was there. And in the short term, it's got a pretty good setup for this to become a stronger system, staying at tropical storm intensity, but becoming a pretty well-formed tropical storm by the time we get to Friday morning. That's only 36 hours from now, and the forecast, keep in mind, it's the very first forecast from the National Hurricane Center. It's a brand new system, and those forecasts are typically more prone to error. It's up to 65 miles per hour, so that's a well-formed tropical storm in Alvin at that point. From there, thankfully, Alvin's got big problems moving farther off to the north, and you can see with the low-level spin, it weakening and becoming more ragged on approach to the southern tip of the Baja. That has a whole lot to do with the fact that it quite literally runs out of gas. Right about this latitude here, you get south of it, that darker red indicates sea surface temperatures in the upper 80s and low 90s, or to about 90. That's super supportive for the intensification of a tropical system. North of that, you get into those greens, the 70s. That's not even enough for the system to maintain its intensity. So this is decaying as it moves farther off to the north. Not to mention there's some dry air in the mix and a bunch of wind shear that'll be forcing in that dry air and basically tearing the top right off this system and making it lopsided at the very best. I think this thing gets effectively completely shredded, but some of that moisture around that upper level low, you can see it here, likely pivots, gets pulled in up toward the desert southwest, and that could enhance the coverage of some rain and thunderstorms out that way. So there will be a lot to watch.
You know, we live in a beautiful state. We got beautiful beaches, but guess what? We have hurricanes every so often. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. You can always rebuild your house. You can't rebuild your life. So the most important thing is get prepared. I want everybody to do it. I'm traveling the state. I was in Southwest Florida yesterday, today in Miami and Tampa, tomorrow in Orlando and Pensacola, just working to get the state ready.
That's Florida Senator Rick Scott describing the deal you make when you live down in the hurricane zone, such a beautiful part of the country, but dealing with the potential for hurricanes is part of life. And now we've got this 2025 Atlantic season drawing closer, and folks that live in the hurricane zone have to prepare as they always do. The Sunshine State, though, hit especially hard last year. 3 landfalling hurricanes, a couple of majors. Jane, we've got Fox Weather's Jane Menard back with us today. Pacific jumped Atlantic because of the new developments, but we're only a few days out from the start of the Atlantic season. It's wild to say that.
I know, it's hard to wrap your head around that June is next week. But here we go, and you need to be prepared. I mean, we have these conversations now just so that you can best equip yourself with the tools and the knowledge that you need going into the season ahead of us. Now, June typically can be a messy month for any tropical disturbances. There's been some chatter that the start of hurricane season may start off a bit active. No guarantee that we'll see that pattern come to fruition, but let's take a peek into what we're watching right now, at least now and then in the next couple of weeks. Tropical waves, we've got a pair out there right now, one emerging into the Caribbean as we speak, one just off the coast of South America. Now, there is plenty of moisture here, but you can see some drier air across the Caribbean, down across the ITCZ, where you have that lift and that abundant thunderstorm action into the northwestern Gulf, where we have that dying front and some showers and storms that have picked up along it. But we've got a lot of wind shear too, and those hostile upper level winds, a very present feature to the beginning of the season. It's a limiting factor to getting any of those tropical waves, any kind of oomph to become something a little more. That tropical growth is certainly hindered. Dust is another factor, especially early on in the season. We've got a big plume of it working across the main development region. That's going to lift up into the Caribbean and in fact into the Gulf as we go through the early part of next week. And so really, that's going to squander anything from coming together in the mid-levels. We'll make for some pretty sunrises and sunsets there if you live on the Gulf Coast. But this is the period that we're watching. Now, yes, we've got a big old plume of dust gearing up to move off the main development region, but there's a little bit of a lull here as we go into the later half of next week. Now, what happens in that lull? Well, we could see some increased moisture, shower and thunderstorm development in the first 2 weeks of the Atlantic hurricane season, being the first 2 weeks of June. This is likely to favor the Eastern Pacific, where dust is less abundant as it kind of shifts up through the Caribbean and into the Gulf. We have development likely not only in the first week but into the second week of the month of June. But also too, that's when things get a little more interesting. We bring the Bay of Campeche, a sliver of the Caribbean, into the mix with that increased rain chance up through the Bahamas. We could at the very least see the opportunity for some tropical moisture to lift up into the Gulf. That would increase the rainy season across spots like the Sunshine State. But where we have that development likely, or I should say possible, through the areas of mid-June, that's typically when we'd see it. These dying fronts that move off the coast, they hang out in the Gulf, and suddenly you get a little spin of energy and a really messy system.
Yeah, it doesn't always take a whole lot, but Jane, we talked about how if it was weak, some folks would be glad to see one.
Well, yeah, I mean, Cristobal in 2020 was a perfect example. No flooding concerns, but it shaved away at some of the drought, and so people there were actually rejoicing.
Yeah, as long as you can dodge severe weather with all the spin in those things, the rain can be very beneficial right at the very end of the dry season. Jane, we're looking ahead to the new season, but we're still looking back toward last year, still ahead. Trees ripped down by Hurricane Helene last year are now making it harder for crews to fight wildfires. We're live on the ground in Tennessee, where crews are hard at work. When Fox Weather Now comes right back.
It's the final hour here on Weather Command. Thanks for watching Fox Weather. I'm Stephen Morgan.
And I'm Britta Merwin in for Marissa Torres this morning. Thanks for staying with us. It is Thursday, May 29th.
And if we've been wondering where's Alvin,
it's here.
We have Alvin, the first named storm of the Eastern Pacific hurricane season. The advisory due out by 11 o'clock Eastern came a bit early, and that's when the National Hurricane Center labeled this as Tropical Storm Alvin. We've seen some persistence with the storms around the center, and Alvin showing some signs of life. In fact, strengthening is expected over the next 24 hours as we give you live looks this morning along the Pacific coastline of Mexico. And our first visible images, Britta, some of the best work that I think our satellites offer. My opinion.
I agree. If you're going to pick one product, I mean, out of everything, I would pick Visible Satellite. You just get so much information from it, but also there is some beauty to it. I mean, it is incredible to see the definition of these clouds. Stephen's just circling and highlighting the circulation within this storm.
Yeah, probably where the center is. I think that's the unique thing about these systems, that while you try to look for the center of the storm, because a hurricane, in theory, as it begins to strengthen, it will develop an eye. Probably not going to see that with this storm. I guess we'll see. Who knows? But you also, aside from what's developing around that core, and as it establishes a core, you get these bands, or you also get these flare-ups of storms that are removed from the eye. And actually,
thunderstorms to the northeast are impressive.
Some of the strongest ones that I think we have out of the whole system, just to the northeast of the eye. So the fact of the matter is, we've got a strengthening tropical storm here, and we'll be watching this, but it's right now in probably the best environment that it can find itself in.
The next 24 hours is the window.
Yeah, it's optimal opportunity. It's early in the season, though, so the ceiling that we have for this thing, it's not, you know, like an August or September type of storm. So you manage the expectations with Alvin.
And some of that is also the track. We're already getting a northerly component to this track. The more north we go, the closer we get to this steep drop off. We go from 80-degree water temperatures to the 60s very quickly in the Pacific. And so that's why you have this forecast that, you know, if you just paid attention to tomorrow morning, you'd be like, this is going to have 60-mile-per-hour winds in 24 hours. Yeah, I'll give you that. That's impressive. But then we're going to drop off just as quickly because our water temperatures tank. You need 80 degrees for at least 150 feet down in the water table to support growth. And when you throw in water temperatures in the 60s, I mean, it's like throwing a bag of ice on someone. You know, it's like, okay, going to cool you down. You're done.
Yep. The high confidence forecast that we have from a track perspective, the Hurricane Center mentioning that in their discussion, these lines, they're seeming to agree. Notice how we don't have some crazy outliers. If anything, the H-Wharf, this is the center of Alvin. Maybe a little to the left, a little too far left, but generally speaking, this is going to have a northward bend that it eventually takes.
I would argue, though, even that, you know, a little bit farther to the one, it wouldn't do anything because that farther to the west solution is still in 60-degree water temperatures.
Even cooler. Yeah. When you're looking at it from an intensity forecast, even before it gets to the tip of the Baja,
there's no way around the reality.
This thing's going to be a remnant low. We will no longer be addressing or calling it Tropical Storm Alvin. It's now until maybe at the latest Saturday afternoon, but that might be a bit generous. We might see this thing begin to transition
by Friday evening,
tomorrow night. The water temperatures that we have, obviously, the closer you get to the equator, the warmer those temperatures get. You head up farther to the north, you've got some currents in the Pacific current of note that brings some very cold water from Alaska that hugs the coastline. So you get into these temperatures where, from a heat content standpoint, you're not going to have a thriving storm, especially when you're late May, the season's starting, you know, just about 10 days ago here.
Because those water temperatures, they will warm up as we work our way into August. There's a look at the forecast here, and you can tell less impressive rotation as it moves up towards Cabo. Cabo San Lucas isn't even calling for tropical storm force wind gusts in their forecast. So what can you expect? Let's say you have a vacation in Cabo this weekend, early next week, you're getting married, you're like, oh, great. Really? Alvin's out there. You know, take a deep breath. The reality is it's not going to be the best weather. I mean, gosh, if you're going down to Cabo, you want beautiful blue sky, and that's not what you're going to see. You'll have cloud cover, you'll have breezy weather, some showers that move on, a couple thunderstorms as well. But given the comparison of what can happen with a tropical system for Cabo, I mean, this is easy to get through. It's inconvenient. We know that. But the bulk of what Alvin has to dish out is the next 24 hours over water.
Yeah. Christopher, keep it here for a second, because what we'll notice with the hostile winds, there is going to be some shear. And one thing about tropical cyclones, shear is a bad thing. Shear is a good thing for severe weather. That promotes the growth and the intensity. But for hurricanes and like tropical storms, it'll weaken it. It shreds the thing up. But this area of low pressure that we put here, that general troughing, that's what's going to tug Alvin to the north. And so as Alvin does trend northward, we are going to get the moisture pushing up into the southwest. So there will be impacts that we have with Alvin, but it's going to be more so Alvin's remnant moisture. Tropical in nature, yes, but this is sometimes what a weather pattern offers, where you've got the fluid and you've got something working in from the tropics. What could we deal with? The mountains in Mexico going to rob a lot of this moisture, but I do think we get some into New Mexico.
There will be a little bit left,
Yeah.
which could be a silver lining story. New Mexico and West Texas can be blazing hot this time of year with high fire risk. To bring in some cloud cover, some shower potential, and cooler temperatures, that could be a good story for folks that live in New Mexico and West Texas.
So something we'll be paying attention to, and really as the kickoff to Atlantic hurricane season begins Sunday, our special programming will as well.
And the Pacific hurricane season is heating up. Tropical storm Alvin became well formed off the southern coast of Mexico. Thankfully, increasingly hostile conditions will shred Alvin as it approaches the southern tip of the Baja. We're also now watching another area in the Pacific for potential tropical development. We'll talk about that. It's all right now on Fox Weather Now. Hey, good Friday afternoon, everybody. Thank you, as always, for being here with us on Fox Weather. Right now, it's 4 o'clock on the East Coast, 1 p.m. out west. I'm Ian Oliver, and this is Fox Weather Now. We've been talking about this. Got our first named storm this week. It was in the eastern Pacific. It's Alvin, still a tropical storm with sustained winds at 50 miles per hour, although we got a new update coming in from the National Hurricane Center in about an hour's time. This was the 11 a.m. advisory. Winds at 50, motion northwest at 10. Pressure is up some. It's a weakening system at 1,001 millibars, and I think that trend will start to accelerate, the weakening trend, as we move forward through the next several hours. We'll talk about all this and what kind of shape the Atlantic side is in. Let's go down to the Pacific now, where Tropical Storm Alvin is weakening. We're waiting on that new update coming in a little bit less than an hour from the National Hurricane Center. There's also, though, a new area that we're watching in the eastern Pacific, and that's kind of how the EPAC operates. Once it gets going, it has stretches where it's really going. So we'll see if this is going to be one of those. That's Alvin, still several hundred miles off to the south of the Baja, drifting in that direction. You notice its structure for a little while. Second half of the day yesterday, early part of the day today, early this morning, it was looking pretty good on visible satellite, to be honest, using a ripe setup, both warm sea surface temperatures and favorable atmospheric conditions. All of that is over with. All of it is gone, and it's becoming increasingly hostile as it gains latitude, as it moves off to the north. So much so that I doubt this is still, by definition, still a tropical system arriving in the Baja, never mind a depression. Look how cool this water is. Sea surface temperatures that are just in the 70s, and with that, this is not supportive of a tropical system at all. Typically, the benchmark is about 80, up above 82. It starts becoming healthier. This is the wind shear that's acting on it. So there's this mid-level area of low pressure parked west of the Baja. That's interacting with Alvin now, too. And that was why you could see some of that cloud cover stretching off to the north and east, because at the upper levels, it's getting forced in that direction by some of those stronger winds, a little bit of dry air around, too. We'll watch these areas farther back to the south and east for a possible area of low pressure middle part of next week. So just some signs of life effectively coming out of the Pacific. Let's move over to the Atlantic side, though, and we'll bring in Jane Menard. Jane, you've had laser focus, right, on the Atlantic basin to get things started, and rightfully so. Folks can be a little bit uneasy this time of the year, especially after a year like last year.
I mean, very active, and we're still calling for above average activity. It really only takes one. I know it's kind of the moniker that we take into each season with us. Good news is, for right now, things are quiet. And this is the 4th year in a row that we haven't had any preseason activity.
Yeah, and after that run of like 7 in a row,
right? 7 years.
Yeah.
7 in a row where we had something that developed right before the season. So we watch a couple tropical waves, nothing really of note. The environment still right now is pretty hostile, but things look to change. And this is what we do now. We look for those little clues in the long range. You know, what's the weather pattern potentially going to look like? Do we see some increased storminess in this particular zone, especially zones favored closer to home in spots like the Caribbean and maybe even into the Gulf?
Just made me remember, me and BVD were hollering at each other about this earlier this week. We did have, what, 2 years ago when the NHC went back in January and said there was a storm.
But it was unnamed, so.
Fair enough. The technicalities, it all works. But yeah, you said this. It's a gyre type setup, broad area of spin over Central America into the second week of June especially.
First week we open up and it looks to really favor the Eastern Pacific, which is why, no surprise, well, next week we do have an area to watch. So that's something that we'll definitely be monitoring, but I'm looking at the increased rain and how that footprint really begins to spread across the Caribbean basin and then even up into spots of the Atlantic, the Bahamas included in this as well. So what this signals to me is tropical moisture becoming much more abundant, more rising air, and the possibility at this point with a gyre, that broad area of low pressure setting up, that we could maybe see a little seedling work into those warm waters.
Sure. I mean, you're looking for warm water. It's in both of those spots. Little pocket of favorable atmosphere, some spin with the gyre. Maybe that's just enough to do it, but most certainly over on the Pacific side. I mean, that's an actual outlook from the CPC, the Climate Prediction Center, their tropical hazards. They have development likely both of those weeks in the Pacific. It could be busy there.
I think so too. And so we'll be watching. This signal to me when we see that enhancement or that favoring of increased rain and thunderstorm development further off to the east also does coincide with potentially a weather pattern that lifts those hostile winds a little further to the north. So now that really does begin to open up this region for an environment where upstairs and at the surface is more conducive for some development possible. High pressure parked off in the Atlantic is that steering component up to the north. But this is the one piece in the forecast right now that definitely will keep at least the main development region nice and quiet.
Yeah, this whole zone, if the dust is there, storms are not. And
we've got plenty of it.
Yeah.
And that dust too, that's going to work its way in to the Gulf next week.
So yeah, early season, the dust can be our friend. We'll see how long it hangs with us this year.
Listen, it was with us last 2 years pretty abundantly.
Yeah, decent chunk.
In the East Pacific, lighten up. We now have Tropical Storm Barbara off the coast of Mexico, expected to become a hurricane in the next few days. 2 other areas to watch as well over the next week. The tropics coming to life. We finally have Barbara.
Yeah, we were waiting anxiously. We knew Barbara was kind of an indefinite thing. It was a matter of when. And the answer to that was early Sunday morning, around 3 a.m. Barbara was designated as a tropical storm. And then we still have Invest 91E and an area to watch as well out in the Eastern Pacific. So the EPAC is certainly showing off in terms of tropical season. But I'm okay with the Atlantic Basin taking a bit of a backseat for now. We'll have more details on what we can expect for the Atlantic hurricane season, at least for the month of June, coming up here in a minute. But Barbara, with the 5 a.m. advisory, 45-mile-per-hour winds moving west-northwest at 12 miles per hour. Barbara is actually expected to become a hurricane. So this would be the first hurricane for the Northern Hemisphere into 2025. That's expected in the next 24 hours. So look at this, 75-mile-an-hour winds by Monday morning. That would be that hurricane designation there. It'll continue to have a little bit of room for strengthening by Monday evening, 80 miles per hour, and then it will rapidly weaken. And so a big part of that is a less favorable wind environment and also some cooler waters. So multiple things working against Barbara in its future. But for now, we get to watch and kind of see how that all unfolds over the next 24 hours. It also could have some interaction with Invest 91E. At this point, 35 miles per hour looks better on satellite presentation than it did this time yesterday. And we're still looking at a decent chance for development over the next little bit. And we also have an area to watch, which has also gone up now to 40% chance as opposed to 20, which is what we were staring at just yesterday. Now look what happens here. You've got 2 areas of low-level spin. That would be Barbara, which is this storm right here, and then Invest 91E, which I believe could be Cosme, if that's how you pronounce it. But Cosme, yes. So what could happen is you get a little interaction, and that is called the Fujiwara effect. Here's a couple of just key pieces of information here. It occurs when 2 tropical cyclones are close together, which is what we're seeing right now, and they begin to dance around each other. And so what happens is they start to almost spin around each other there. They can merge and become one stronger storm. One storm can take over, or they can both duke it out, and then they both end up losing. So at this point, it does look like they're both going to lose at the end of the day. Whether or not the Fujiwara effect, really does come to fruition, they've got the cooler waters, and so it's just not going to be conducive for them moving forward. But those are just a few examples of sort of what can happen when this type of thing does start to occur. It's not completely rare. I feel like we use this graphic once or twice every hurricane season, so I wouldn't be surprised if we have another shot at seeing a Fujiwara effect for the Atlantic Basin later down the line. But for right now, it's just that brushing up on tropical terminology right now, I guess you could say. Chance of development over the next 10 days, obviously really high here. It's already Barbara. And then you've got 91E, which also looks like it has a great chance at turning into Cosme in the next 24 hours. So, Nick, it's a lot to get to when it comes to the Eastern Pacific, still expected to be very active. And then we've got the Atlantic season that we have to catch back up on.
That's right. Luckily, nothing.
Myers, Florida. Homeowners and businesses still recovering amid the 2025 season. Fox Weather's Bob Van Dillen, he got to talk to Fort Myers Beach Mayor Dan Allers about how his town is preparing for the season and, of course, rebuilding from last year's horrific storm.
Well, we're coming back as fast as we can. You know, we've had 5 storms that have really affected us, including Ian, since Ian. So, in 2.5 years, almost 3 years, we've had 5 storms that have had water on the island. You can always move faster, but we've got a lot of people investing back in. We just approved another resort that's coming back to the island. So, and homes are going up every day. So we're excited about the progress. We just, wish we could go a little bit faster.
Yeah, that was the one question I had is are you happy with how things are recovering at this point? It looks like things are coming back. But when we look at video like what we're watching right here, it is hard to imagine that people would even want to, but you guys are resilient.
Well, we're fortunate. We've got a good, community of people here with our full-time residents and our seasonal residents. And, the visitors have been great. They've been coming back the last 2 seasons. This season was even better than last season. So, I think as long as you have a beautiful beach like we do, people are willing to come back. And I think the businesses are seeing that. Our residents, we're getting some new residents. Obviously, we lost some after the storm, but we're seeing some new people come back. So I wouldn't say we're thriving, but we're definitely projecting up.
Yeah, what is the mood down there, Dan? We're talking about the possibility of another above active hurricane season. They seem to come in clusters. Let's hope it steers away from the west coast of Florida. But what's the mood going into this early part of the season?
Well, of course, it's still on everybody's mind. Milton wasn't that long ago, and obviously Helene and Ian, we're still reeling from that. But people are cautiously optimistic, I guess I would say. We certainly are prepared should something come. We're crossing our fingers and doing whatever kind of dance we can do to make sure that it doesn't come our way. But these storms, even when they're offshore like Milton was, we still take an impact from it. We're just about done with our beach renourishment, which is certainly going to help should we get any kind of normal flood or normal water routine, things that we go through. But we're certainly looking for a break. So if there's anything you guys can do on your end to give us a little break, that'd be great.
Yeah, my friend, I would if I could. There's no question. But let's say that there is another hurricane on the board. Have you guys changed any of your mode of operations? Have you learned anything from the previous couple of years where you're going to enact for this year? Anything new?
Yeah, you learn a little bit from everything. Every storm you get stronger. Milton, I think, was probably as close to a success, if you could use that word, as we could possibly have hoped for. We were first out of the gate to make sure we gave everybody enough time to do the mandatory evacuations and get them off the island. And because they did, and they believed in us that we would get them back on the island as soon as possible, within just a few hours after the storm passing, we were able to get debris cleaned up and at least allow people a path to get back to their homes. So, it always starts with people understanding that if you have a mandatory evacuation, we don't do it because we want to. We do it because we have to, and we think it's the best thing to do to protect you. And if you heed that warning and you get off the island, our first responders have the ability to get on the island, make sure everybody's safe and secure. After Milton, they had 0 calls for service, which allowed us to get the island back in our control fairly quickly. And within 4 or 5 hours, we had people coming back over the bridge to go to their homes. So if we ask you to leave, please leave, and we'll get you back, we promise, as fast as possible.
That is such a good way to put it, man. It's like you're not telling people to leave just because you can. It's because you need to.
Yeah.
Dan, a great way to put it for sure. Fort Myers Beach Mayor Dan Allers, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. Good luck this season. I know it's early, but right now things look pretty good.
Well, we're crossing our fingers and hoping for the best and enjoying the sun.
Well, all is quiet in the Atlantic Basin right now. There is a chance that could change as we get into kind of the middle part of the month. And I know we're getting closer and closer to that, and we've been advertising that for a little bit. And I want to just go through some of the details and why we're talking about the possibility for some development. And overall, it's starting to look more and more like a small chance. You can see things are pretty quiet right now. Again, this is not the time of year where you see a lot of action coming off the west coast of Africa. We tend to have a lot of Saharan dust that's around, so that can dry systems out. out. We've also got a lot of wind shear that tends to be around out in that part of the Atlantic, where we do have a little bit of a chance at possibly seeing something try to form within the next week or two, is maybe in the southwestern Gulf, possibly in the western Caribbean, but it really is more of a bullseye over the eastern Pacific, as we've seen with all the action that's going on out there right now. We've got 2 named storms and another area to watch. We'll cover that in more detail coming up. But as far as the Atlantic Basin specifically, coming up within the next couple of weeks, we're going to see kind of a general increase in the amount of showers and thunderstorms going on around Central America. This could be kind of a Central American gyre type of setup. Big area of low pressure that it's very broad and large, and it will just sit and spin over Central America. And it can spin off these little smaller areas of low pressure on the outside of it. We'll start to see some more favorable upper level conditions with a little bit less wind shear as we get into that time frame. But you still notice, again, here we are the 11th through the 17th. So what is today? June 8th. So this would be what, like Wednesday of this upcoming week through the Wednesday of next week, and you can still see the bullseyes off the coast of Mexico, but it's this generalized area where we have some more, kind of a higher chance at the development of areas of low pressure. And then we get into the 18th through the 24th, and it's still the majority of the chance for action is out in the East Pacific, but you got a little chunk of that southwestern Gulf that we'll just have to watch a little bit. So overall, we've seen worse outlooks than this for June. Again, if we were to see something form this time of year, it usually is in that area, so that wouldn't be all that weird. We tend to see more homegrown storms this time of year, meaning storms that form a little bit closer to the U.S. rather than way out here. Now, of course, last year we had just a crazy storm with Beryl that formed in late June, lasted through early July, made it all the way through the Caribbean, eventually made landfall up in Texas. You guys know what I'm talking about if you experienced that. But these are all the storms since 1950 that have formed in the month of June, and they are typically a lot closer to home. So this wouldn't be the weirdest setup when it comes to that. Again, you look at the long-range forecast here for the 11th through the 17th. A lot of rising air. We're in the positive phase of the MJO, the Madden-Julian oscillation. It just means generally more rising air around, and that kind of helps if we were to get a storm to form, that it could flourish. But the thing is, we've also got a lot of very strong wind. This is another thing why this time of year we don't generally see storms that make it all the way across the Atlantic. A lot of wind shear. You got a lot of the Saharan dust that dries those storms out, and some pretty fast trade winds there. Guys, we gotta love that story. Look at these big waves crashing Puerto Escondido in Mexico. 2 tropical systems off the Mexican coast in the Pacific, and they both have a name. We're just running through the names in the East Pacific so far. Been a very active beginning of the season. We haven't had any big landfalls or anything like that. The storms have been mostly out to sea, but we've had at least some impacts here and there. We've got Barbara and Cosme right now. Cosme is the newest one. This actually just got named recently. Let me go over to the satellite view, get a little bit of a better view of this. Neither of them are terribly well put together right now. You've got Barbara that's right here. You've got Cosme that's a little bit farther off toward the west. And we actually have another area to watch that's a little bit southeast of both of these storms that's off of the coast of Central America. But let's go one by one. Let's go through Barbara. This one's been a tropical storm for a little while. 60-mile-per-hour winds with that one. Moving toward the west-northwest at 12 miles per hour, I should say. And the thing with this one is it's going to move away from the coast of Mexico. This is not going to be a big deal. At first, it looks like it's going to make a little bit of a run at the Baja Peninsula, but it actually, the cone takes it farther off toward the west. You've got some islands out here with extremely low population. This one has, I believe, no population. It said uninhabited when I was looking all this stuff up on Wikipedia. Had to look it up. You know, I saw the cone, and I'm like, what are these islands that are down here? There is a little bit of tourism. I guess there are some people that will go like snorkeling out there, but I think like 250 population of this southern island. Either way, it is part of Mexico, way off the coast there, and for the most part, these storms aren't going to be affecting anybody. Let's have a look at Cosme, which again, the 5 p.m. advisory, 45-mile-per-hour wind on that one, moving toward the northwest at 8 miles per hour. And this one, once again, pretty much a fish storm for the most part. It's just going to meander, not really move all that quickly, and just take a little bit of a drift off toward the northeast. So again, it's active, but the thing is, this time of year especially, the water is much cooler as you get up closer to, let's say, places like Cabo, right? So again, here's Barbara, and it starts to make that run at the Baja Peninsula, and then it will turn off toward the west and kind of die down too, because the water is just much cooler out there. So that's pretty much the story in the East Pacific right now.
Welcome into Fox Weather Live. I'm Haley Meyer. The South has been soaked, slammed, and storm worn out all weekend, and the new work week is ushering in even more severe storms. The Southeast is under the primary threat tonight, with major cities in the path. While the South's been wrestling with relentless storms, the tropics are also swirling up a saga of their own. We're tracking a parade of storms across the Eastern Pacific. Our first hurricane of 2025 officially here, that being Hurricane Barbara. But could we have our second named hurricane of the season being Hurricane Cosme? It's possible. And we also have another area to watch that's slowly gaining more steam just to the south, all while the Atlantic sits in a quiet and dusty silence. We'll get you caught up on everything that happened today, what's happening right now, and what's to come tomorrow. First off, though, we want to get you started on the radar and the next few days. Well, the Pacific is popping off. 2025's first hurricane is officially here, with our second soon on the way. Hurricane Barbara, churning in the Eastern Pacific, forming this morning off of Mexico's west coast. So hurricane season, here we go. Thankfully, it's not in the Atlantic, so we can kind of put those eases to rest a little bit for now. And we'll dive deeper onto what we're expecting for the Atlantic over the next little bit. But the Eastern Pacific, they've been very active. Category 1, and we're not expecting Barbara to be gaining really any more strength over the next little bit. Here's that forecast track for you by Tuesday morning, still maintaining hurricane or just shy of hurricane strength. Now we're at 65 miles per hour. That bring it back down by Tuesday morning. So we're in this cooler water now, and we also have the increase of wind shear. So for the west coast of Mexico, Barbara's not anything you should be too concerned with, which is some good news there. Yes, you could see a few scattered showers and thunderstorms right up against the coast, but it seems just enough out towards the west that should be fairly minimal. One thing we've seen, though, look at those massive waves right below me. That's in Acapulco, Mexico. You have all of this activity going on in the EPAC, from Cosme to Barbara to this area to watch, which will likely be our D-named storm, and that's helping to churn up the water. So for surfers, it's great. For somebody who likes to sit on the sand, this is maybe not my best beach forecast for you, but at this point, they don't have much time left to go in that warm water, whether that be Cosme or Barbara. They're right now just starting to encounter that 60 and 70 degree mark. As far as the area to watch right behind it, it's sitting comfortably in the 90s. I would say at this point probably has 800 miles or so for that northwest movement until it finds itself into that cooler, ice-cold water for hurricane standards, if you will. For Cosme, it's picking up. Just shy of hurricane force. We are not at a hurricane yet, 70 miles per hour. You need to get to 75 in order to watch that change from a tropical storm into a hurricane. But honestly, it could be a close call. I want to say probably 75% chance we do get Hurricane Cosme. We do see a lot of intensification in the overnight hours with tropical systems, but it's so close to that cool water, it doesn't have much time. In addition, it's decently close to Barbara, so we are going to be tracking out potentially some interaction there. Cosme is the real question mark, though, on what happens moving forward. Do we get a Fujiwara effect, which is basically when hurricanes dance around each other, move almost in a circular motion? And at this point, the NHC is still hopeful, or still predicting, I guess I should say, that there will be a hurricane coming from Cosme Tuesday morning. But by the time you get 24 hours later, already back down to 60 miles per hour, and then a sort of churning off into the distance from each other. But their wind fields could be interacting. And so as Cosme gains a little bit more strength, if it's allowed to do so, that wind field could inhibit Barbara and lead to even faster weakening of these two systems. So for Barbara at this point, looks fairly decent going into the later evening hours, and we'll see how things shape up into the morning. Meanwhile, in the Atlantic, there are no immediate threats or areas to watch. We have hostile winds and a lot of Saharan dust. I mean, to Talk about the Saharan dust. Look at this hazy sunset from Panama City Beach, Florida. Dust, the one positive to this is that the sunsets and the sunrises are absolutely gorgeous. I've seen them all over my social media. So take full advantage of that. That's probably one of the only good things when it comes to dust in the air. And also the fact that it curtails hurricane development. So for the Atlantic, we have unlikely tropical development in the next 7 days. So we can, know that the Atlantic basin is a bit more on the quiet side for now. I mean, that can change really fast as we get deeper into hurricane season. You've got the ITCZ pulling right across the equator. To the north of that, though, a lot of dry air, which is inhibiting that development. We also got some headwinds coming here as well, so a lot of wind shear. We do have a few tropical waves that have been moving off the coast of Africa, and typically those would be a bigger concern. But with the winds, with the dry air, and the Saharan dust, all three of those ingredients are working against the formation of a wave into any kind of tropical system. Water temperatures right now, this is a departure from average. If you look at the MDR, we're right around average. Some spots maybe a touch cooler, others a touch warmer. Head out towards the Gulf of America or into the Caribbean, we are in that sweet spot as well, maybe a touch above average. For the main development region, we had Beryl last year, 2024. We were so far above average that it was conducive to see a tropical wave form into a formidable hurricane, a Cat 5. That was Beryl. And then look at all that dust that's going to continue to move all the way across the Atlantic basin and continue to bring those beautiful sunrises and sunsets to the Caribbean, eventually maybe starting to peel a little bit further north into South Florida.
All right, the Eastern Pacific Basin kicking into gear over the last couple of weeks. San Jose del Cabo, Mexico. That is the southern tip of the Baja Peninsula, where we've got Tropical Storm Barbara that's really not too far offshore, but it is dying a very quick death over some much cooler water than it's been over. This is Barbara right here, and yeah, you can just look at that. You can see it's dying very, very quickly. And then you've got Cosme, which is also a tropical storm farther off toward the southwest. Now, there's another cluster of some thunderstorms off the coast of Mexico that's likely to become the next named tropical system, so we're just running through the names in the East Pacific so far. Meanwhile, it's been very quiet out in the Atlantic. So let's look at the individual storms here. We've got Barbara, 40-mile-per-hour wind, again, losing strength very quickly. Look at this. It's very, very puny looking on the infrared satellite right now. Yeah, still a little bit of a counterclockwise spin, but again, there's a very sharp cutoff here. It's like warm water here, and then you've got much cooler water up here. And so the storms make it over that cooler water, and they just die. They just die very quickly. So here's the cone, which is really not much of a cone anymore on Barbara. It's going to die pretty soon. And this is Cosme, again, farther toward the west. Kind of a similar story. It's going to last a little bit longer than Barbara, but by Thursday afternoon, probably even by Thursday morning, this is post-tropical. Way off the coast, this is a fish storm that will really not be affecting anybody. Whoops, I should not have put on that visible satellite because obviously the sun has been going down and we can't really see anything there. But here's the new area that I was talking about. It's off the coast of Mexico. 80% chance of development over the next 7 days. And just to give you an idea of the water temperatures here, again, Cosme and Barbara, these are both storms that formed out over this warmer water. And as they moved up toward the northwest, you can see right now they're just starting to get over that cooler water, and that's why they're dying so fast. It's a really simple story. A lot of the times it's more complicated, like, you've got wind shear, you've got moisture problems, etc. This is just, you need warm water in order to have a well put together tropical system. And in this case, we do not have enough warm water. So there you go. Barbara kind of shearing out. And then Cosme, as it moves toward the northeast, is also going to die. And then we get the new storm that forms off the coast. So we'll be talking about that one for sure. Oh, by the way, the name of that storm, let's go to the names. Let's see what that's going to be. Dalila. How about that? Hey there, Dalila. All right, guys, it's been a pleasure having you along.
Now, Fox Weather is your hurricane HQ, and the Eastern Pacific Ocean is active. We now have Tropical Storm Dalila. Most of the wind associated with Dalila will stay offshore, but winds can begin to get gusty over the next couple of days. And you're looking at towards San Cabo here, this is out of Mexico, where the waves are starting to crash on shore here too. This is an area that's notorious for having black flags or red flags out on the beach, meaning that you cannot get into the water because it is too rough. You'll notice this is why. I mean, there's a couple of folks out there trying to take advantage of these big waves, but if you're not an advanced swimmer, this is not somewhere that you want to be, because we now have another named storm up across the board. It's becoming more organized. It's becoming more of a mature storm, and you're starting to see some of that spin within the storm in itself. So we have the core of the storm. That's very apparent here on the enhanced satellite. You'll notice that the leading edge of the storm has a cluster of showers and storms that are a bit more stronger, those thunderstorms. You can see the cloud tops kind of blossoming, and you're seeing some of that black and purple, meaning that those are really warm core storms that are pushing around the center of this storm. Winds right now sit at around 40 miles per hour. So again, it's on the lower end of the spectrum in terms of a tropical storm, but it is a tropical storm. And we have it moving towards the northwest at around 14 miles per hour. Pressure sits at around 1001 millibars. Looking at the storm in itself, these are the thunderstorms that I was talking about. You'll notice that they just continue to blossom up and explode, wrapping around themselves as it pushes along the coast of Mexico. Well, it being so close to Mexico and being in such an environment that is ripe for more, activity and more strengthening, it makes it a little bit more dangerous for those who live along the immediate coast of Mexico. I think the best news here is that while we'll get the rough surf, may have a couple of showers that expand across the coast of Mexico, this continues to be a fish storm. It moves out towards the Pacific through the course of the weekend and into early next week. Until then, where we have the roughest of the surf and those showers and storms, tropical storm warnings and watches are up across the southwest coastline of Mexico. I want to take it back to the future radar here so we can see how those storms kind of expand across the coastline. They push closer towards an area like Cabo San Lucas, and then as the storm itself makes that curve out towards the Pacific, it starts to dissipate. It moves into an area that isn't too conducive for further development. Now ahead, we'll also keep a close eye on the Atlantic season coming up in this hour as well. We'll break down why it's been so quiet so far for the start of the season and what could come next in line.
But it wouldn't completely rule it out, especially when it comes to hurricane season and in the water temperatures that it's in, all of the things working for the storm. But I think the overall consensus, and even my thought here, it will be just a Category 3 upon landfall. A lot of mountainous terrain across western Mexico, and that will shear out this storm so fast. It will rapidly weaken. But it was able to find just that perfect pocket. Erick is in that Goldilocks zone. Over 90, over 80 plus temperatures rather for the water, and that is conducive and then some to watch further strengthening. But you can see what's happening. We're already getting some tropical downpours as it moves closer and closer to shore. This is Thursday about 7 a.m. where we're already looking at that eye scraping the coast. For Acapulco, you're going to be watching those waters really flow parallel to shore, but eventually pull off of shore as it comes through, but still very heavy rain that's going to be moving through the area. As far as Mexico City goes, they've had significant flooding over the last few days. The wettest day they've had since 2017 was just a few days ago. So you're already talking about waterlogged soil, and then you're dumping another 3, 5, 8+ inches of rainfall. In some instances over towards Pachutla, we're talking 8 to 12 inches of rain. Now, when you have the mountains, that's what's going to be a big problem for mudslides, landslides, debris flows, and all of that has been highlighted by the National Hurricane Center, saying these are all very likely outcomes of what we could see from this storm. As far as the Eastern Pacific, you are well ahead of schedule while the Atlantic stays completely quiet. The A-named storm was ahead of schedule, and honestly, we're a month ahead of where we should be with that E-named storm. Typically, the Pacific doesn't see it until July 23rd, so we are a month ahead of that, and we're talking already major hurricanes for this region. As far as the EPAC goes, we're not looking at any areas to watch right now. It's really just Erick, but still the conditions are pretty primed to watch further development. So we could be talking the F, G, and H named storm not too far behind for the system. For the hurricane season as a whole for the EPAC, a little bit different than how the Atlantic does things. Not necessarily the slow climb and a very fast peak hurricane season. It just kind of slowly climbs and then remains pretty stagnant with a lot of activity from mid-June all the way through late September, just due to how warm the waters can be so early on in the year. And we talked about it at the top of the show, but we did get the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center, the 8 o'clock advisory, and that camera out of Puerto Escondido. If you've been with us over the last 3 hours during Fox Weather Live, you've seen it rapidly deteriorate, the water level starting to rise a little bit. Granted, it could be that high tide cycle, but we are getting very close to an arrival of Major Hurricane Erick as it swipes the west coast of Mexico. Now, this upgrade was expected to reach that major hurricane status by tonight, and it still has additional room for strengthening. I don't think we'll get to that Category 4 level here. At some moments, there was a chance, but I just don't think that it has enough time before it really starts to get some interaction with land. But we do have the opportunity for it to strengthen overnight. You get the differential heating between the water and the surface, and so what can happen is you get that extra promotion of thunderstorms at night. What you're looking at is just the history of Erick as it became a tropical storm and then eventually a hurricane, and it actually underwent rapid intensification, which means it just absolutely exploded, but it had the perfect environment to do so. It had very warm waters, low wind shear, and it just had nothing to really impede its development. Where some of its other counterparts, the A, B, C named storm, it was a little bit further off of the coast of Mexico, and so it put it into the cooler waters faster. But Erick had a much smarter play if you were a strengthening hurricane and hugged the shoreline where the water was much warmer. While we did get that upgrade from a hurricane to a major hurricane, everything else with the forecast really stays the same. The hurricane warnings, tropical storm warnings, they didn't change at all in terms of the areas impacted. So Acapulco, you guys are still under that tropical storm warning. Puerto Escondido under the hurricane warning as well. San Marcos out on the west coast of Mexico also under the hurricane warning. Right now, there are some indications that it is undergoing an eye wall replacement cycle. So you can see you have a very defined eye and then eventually now starting to collapse on itself a little bit. And so that is as it's starting to strengthen again. It goes through multiple cycles when you have a very major, intense hurricane. But if it is going through these cycles as it gets closer to land, it can change some of the impacts and its strength. But still, the National Hurricane Center is saying we are expecting 125-mile-an-hour winds by Thursday morning, still keeping it as a Category 3 at that point. By the time it interacts with land, it will rapidly weaken. The mountains in the area will just completely destroy this storm really fast. But the problem with the mountains is that you have the mudslides, the landslides, all of those things that can happen with the elevated terrain. Looking at the hurricane intensity, that big drop-off, that is when we have landfall. To me, I'm expecting that at around 8, 9 o'clock Eastern time, at least, for portions of this area. And then the water temperatures, again, still going to be fueling it into the overnight hours. But a lot of rain already starting for some of these locations. And so we are expecting in some spots at least 8 to as much as 12 inches of rainfall by the time we can finally put Major Hurricane Erick in the rear view.
All right, welcome back to Fox Weather at Night. Hurricane Erick has been putting on a show off the coast of Mexico, just a very well put together hurricane. It's now a major hurricane, so it's got a sustained wind of 120 miles an hour or more. It looks like almost like a little pinhole eye when you look at it on infrared satellite imagery. This is not really a pinhole eye, though. We've seen situations where you have kind of a more legitimate one. Either way, this is going to be a very highly impactful storm for Mexico. Now, again, I know we got a lot of people that are maybe just tuning in here and you're thinking, oh my gosh, there's a hurricane on the screen. Where's this thing going? This is in the East Pacific. It's not going to affect America. This is going to affect the southwest coast of Mexico near Puerto Escondido. Acapulco will be affected by this. This is not going to be another Otis. I just want to be super clear about that. Remember Otis, the one a couple years ago, direct hit on Acapulco. It was supposed to be a tropical storm. The forecast was bad. It ended up being a Category 5 and a totally devastating storm. Now, this one is going to be a devastating storm. Anytime you get a major hurricane, that's a really big deal. The real difference I was trying to point out between this storm and Otis is that for Acapulco specifically, the storm is going to make landfall east of you guys, but it will eventually affect you. You're going to get some effects from it for sure. Look at this satellite imagery. I mean, if you're a weather geek, this is definitely something that is interesting to look at. I was just looking at this, and again, here's Puerto Escondido. I think the most likely scenario is that this probably makes landfall pretty close to there, if not maybe a little bit to the west. I think it's going to be pretty close to Puerto Escondido. The other thing about the way that this is going to make landfall is it's not one of these storms that's just going to come in directly onshore, like perpendicular to the shore, and just move inland, and then it's going to be over. It's going to do one of these things where it kind of goes like this. You know, there's going to be a southeasterly component to the way that it's moving. So, you know, wherever it ends up making landfall, there are many other places west of there that are going to be heavily affected. The storm tends to lose a lot of strength very quickly if it comes in perpendicular to the shore, but if it's moving kind of parallel to the shore and it just rakes the beach like that, it may not lose its strength quite as fast, and then there are a lot of places that have to experience a storm surge and, of course, the extreme wind. It would lose some strength under that situation, too, but not quite as fast as if it moved directly inland into all the terrain, and you can really see the terrain here on this map. Now, by the time it gets to Acapulco, we're probably thinking about a 65-mile-per-hour storm, so it may be below hurricane strength at that point. Right now, the official forecast is for Erick to make landfall as a Category 3 hurricane. There is a chance that it could be a little stronger than that. I don't think it's off the table that we get a Category 4 because the water is just so flippin' warm down here right now. It's in like the mid to upper 80s. This is some of the warmest water that we've got on the planet right now. That's why things tend to be very active this time of year down here. Now, again, you remember the last couple of storms that formed in the East Pacific that we've been talking about, Alvin, Barbara, Cosme, Dalila. They all formed a little bit farther toward the west. You know, it would be an area of thunderstorms down here. It would turn into a tropical storm out here, and then very quickly it would end up over the cooler water and it would die down. That's why those storms weren't that big of a deal. Well, this one was thunderstorms down off the coast of Central America, formed into a tropical storm out here, and then is now moving right over the warmest of the water, and it's also got really not that much wind shear around. So, I mean, this is just in a perfect environment to thrive. So we're thinking landfall Thursday morning. You want to watch Fox Weather First with Craig Herrera, and I believe Zach Green is in, right? Is that who it is, Chris? I can't remember. Yeah, it's either going to be Britta or Zach, but both of them are fantastic, and we'll have some very strong coverage of this during the morning as it's making landfall. Now, again, anytime the system moves inland, it's going to lose its strength pretty quickly, but the problem is it's going to disperse a tremendous amount of rain over this terrain where we're going to get landslides, mudslides, debris flows, and things like that. It's going to be a very messy storm. We could see 1 to 2 feet of rain. So that's 12 to 24 inches of rain as this makes landfall.
Right now on Fox Weather First, Hurricane Erick, a powerful Cat 4 hurricane, is making landfall in southwest Mexico. Tremendous wind damage is anticipated, as well as life-threatening storm surge and historic amounts of rain.
Plus, the eastern seaboard under the...
And good morning. Welcome inside Fox Weather First. We're coming to you live both on the Fox Business Network and Fox Weather. I'm Britta Merwin.
And I'm Craig Herrera. Thank you for joining us on this Thursday morning. Right now, we are tracking severe weather across the east, but also Category 4 hurricane turning in the eastern Pacific. Erick, we've been talking about making landfall, and we're watching the southern coast of Mexico today already having impacts with rain and wind over portions of Mexico at this hour.
It has probably been a very terrifying night for folks along the coast of Mexico. This video was taken ahead of the storm yesterday. Look at the large surf. And Erick went through rapid intensification, which was in the forecast. Outpacing the forecast intensity, though, it is now a Category 4 storm. Looking at satellite, we can tell that the eye has kind of disappeared a little bit on satellite imagery, so you can tell that's starting to interact with land. It's very close to the technical landfall. Now, for a technical landfall of a hurricane, you need the center of the eye to move over land. But I think it's best to think about landfall as a process. Yes, there is a technical moment when landfall occurs, but there is a huge lead up, a crescendo, and then the experience of having a powerful hurricane make landfall. And then the back end of the storm is just as dangerous. So this is a long process that unfortunately Mexico has been going through throughout the overnight.
Look how expansive that storm is, and you talk about the impacts having effects on Mexico overnight through the morning hours. All those winds, all of that rain. And this is a very mountainous region, likely to rain anywhere from 8 to 16 inches of rain. Mudslides would be a major concern for anybody living in this area. Right now it is southwest of Acapulco, but the states of Guerrero and Oaxaca are affected by this right now.
Now, the latest advisory is in. That's the 5 a.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center. The winds have come down to 140. It was 145 of the 2 a.m. advisory. So again, that's why we're saying we can tell that the interaction with land is starting to occur. It's a finite change, but it is that pivotal moment where we're going to start to see this turn into a technical landfall and then a very fast weakening as it pushes onshore. Very mountainous terrain in Mexico where this is making landfall that not only will tear apart the storm, but it will lead to the catastrophic flooding event. Now, in terms of the wind speeds, 25 miles out from the center, that's where the powerful winds are, those winds that are gusting over 100 miles per hour. But the tropical storm force winds, they extend quite some distance, about 70 miles outside of the center of the storm itself.
And you'll notice Puerto Escondido right on the southern side of this. This is a concern when you think about a lot of the buildings. The buildings in this area have been built to withstand earthquakes, not so much wind. And wind in that wind field you were just talking about, Britta, is something that could easily blow out some of the winds and some of the buildings that are on the hillsides or even some of the higher elevations. But hurricane warnings to the north there. Yeah, the video that you're looking at is damage from Hurricane Otis. That was a Cat 5 that just decimated Acapulco 2 years ago. So, you know, just to give you an example of the type of damage that can occur with these powerful hurricanes, again, it is making landfall as we speak. Once it starts to move onshore, it is going to dump a tremendous amount of rain, and the landslides and the wind damage is probably going to be the worst of the video that we see. Stay with us. We'll keep you updated as we watch this closely all morning here on Fox Weather. Fox Weather, also your severe weather HQ. Right now, we are tracking severe weather across the east and a Category 4 hurricane making landfall in the eastern Pacific. That is Hurricane Erick. It is in the process of making landfall. It has been battering southern Mexico throughout the overnight. Thank you for staying with us here on Fox Weather First. I'm meteorologist Britta Merwin. And I'm Craig Herrera. We appreciate you joining us this morning as we continue to watch this. The tropics very active. We also have some severe weather to talk about this morning. Portions of the East Coast and the Midwest as well. The East Coast is going to be dealing with what we have been dealing with across the middle portion of the country. And we do have the chance, it's been upgraded to see some of these storms produce perhaps even some rotation. It does include a chunk of the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic. This is from New Jersey all the way. Tracking a Fox weather alert, Hurricane Erick is making landfall along the Mexican coastline this morning. Explosive development yesterday, which is what the National Hurricane Center was calling for. We jacked up to a Cat 4 during the overnight. So the intensity part of this forecast did outpace the forecast itself. And unfortunately, it likely has been a terrifying night for coastal locations of Oaxaca State. We've had winds that are gusting over 100 miles per hour. The winds within the storm right now are at 140, which, Craig, the 2 a.m. advisory, we're at 145. So obviously the winds, it's a small, drop, but a drop by 5 miles per hour. We're having that interaction with land. Say, look how close it is when you look at the center of the storm and how close it is. Earlier this morning, just missed that little tip, southern Mexico, just south of Puerto Escondido. Now it's moving northwest, rather, at 9 miles per hour. For a moment, they're almost skirting the coast, but that interaction is where the problem is. Once the center of the storm, to your point, where it makes landfall, goes over land, then that's considered the official landfall. That will be called by the National Hurricane Center. But the impacts are being felt right now with the wind. And we have a lot of mountains here and a lot of buildings in those mountains that are taking those winds. These buildings in this part of the country, or the world rather, have been built to withstand earthquakes, not so much hurricanes. So the wind damage is going to be a big concern. And then the rain. Britta, looked at this map specifically as a great way to see the terrain on there. We do have hurricane warnings in place. Yeah, you have massive mountains, and you're going to throw 1.5 feet of rain on those mountains. That's all got to go down to the lower lying areas. And there's not a lot of room between those mountains and the coast. So that's always a big concern there. You see that live shot there of Oaxaca. You take a look at the imagery here. This cone, as you can see, takes it close to south of Acapulco, but also a lot of mountains here. It will still have a lot of moisture to be squeezing out. So that'll be a concern for some very vulnerable places as they've been rebuilding after Otis in 2023. The exclusive Fox Weather exclusive model, Britta, you can see all of the rain extends all the way over a good chunk of southern Mexico too. Notice that it looks like it's just sort of hitting a wall. I'll back it up and then we'll go back through it. But here's landfall with Erick. Heavy rain moves in and it just sits there. That's because of the mountains. It blocks everything and everything rains out. So we're going to have to face extreme wind damage, especially, 30 miles out from wherever this technical landfall ends up
happening. And then we're going to have to deal with just the catastrophic amount of rain. So here's a look at the rain forecast, which in general, 8 to 12 inches, the upper end, but there will be plenty of spots that see 1.5 feet of rain.
Yeah.
And all of that rain will fall in the mountains and then rush back down the mountains towards the Pacific Ocean. That's just the natural pattern of how this is all going to happen. So we had landslides when Hurricane Barbara was offshore a couple weeks ago for this part of the coastline. So imagine what we're going to have with the actual full-blown Cat 4 making landfall. Tough conditions for Mexico. We'll provide you those updates as we are expecting technical landfall to happen anytime. Good morning. Thanks for staying with us here on Fox Weather First as we track Hurricane Erick, a powerful Cat 4 making landfall in Mexico this morning. This is the second hurricane of the 2025 Eastern Pacific season, but this is the first landfall, and unfortunately, it is a massive landfall. I mean, this is a very powerful hurricane. Winds are at 140 miles per hour. Thank you for staying with us this morning. I'm Britta Merwin alongside Craig Herrera. Here's the update on Erick. Again, we're waiting technical landfall, but the eye wall has been scraping the coastline for hours. And because of this northwest trajectory, that could actually continue to occur for a couple more hours. Here's the latest as of the 5 a.m. advisory. Again, winds at 140 miles per hour. It is moving northwest at 9. Now, I do want to zoom in and sort of give you a little deep analysis of what's going on with landfall. A lot of people get caught up on this one moment in time, but it's very important to note that landfall is more of a process. Is there a technical scientific landfall? Absolutely. And again, that's going to be happening over the next several hours. What they count landfall as is when the center of the eye moves onshore. So, Craig, that point is so close to the shoreline. My concern, though, is that with this eye and this storm still moving northwest, that entire eye wall is interacting with land and will be for the next several hours. I mean, it's so close to landfall, but technically it's missing the center of the eye. And that eye wall is just going to scrape the coastline. In that eye wall, we're talking about wind gusts that are probably greater than 120 miles per hour. So this is probably the most unfortunate trajectory here, to have an eye wall interact with land and just scrape across your coastline hour after hour. If we could get this on land, then we can start moving forward. And that process is going to be painful in itself, because not only are we talking about wind, but we're talking about a tremendous amount of rain.
To your point, it's moving northwest at 9 miles per hour. And look at the terrain there. It's northwesterly cutoff on the land there. So that's a big, big point there. We have to watch for those winds and the rain, Britt, as well. 12 inches, maybe up to 16 inches of rain in some cases. And as we watch Erick, we are now 5 for 5 with named storms in the Eastern Pacific this season so far. Erick, the 5th named storm we've been talking about. We haven't had this active of a start in the Eastern Pacific hurricane season since 2018. And listen to this, that's when we had 6 named storms in the month of June alone. Now, we haven't had this type of activity start in the Eastern Pacific again since 2018. That's when we had 6 named storms. And take a look at those named storms here. A lot of them happen: Aletta, Bud, Carlotta, Daniel, Amelia, and Fabio. Fabio, by the way, happened right at the end of the month. So here's what we want to emphasize as we look at 2018. No two seasons are the same. No two storms are the same. The atmospheric conditions were completely different, as they are from year to year, so keep that in mind. So when we look at these storms, Aletta was a major hurricane. Bud was also a major hurricane. Tropical Storm Carlotta, Tropical Storm Daniel, and Tropical Storm Amelia were there. We had, as we look at the paths, Bud is the one that made landfall close to Mexico there. Now, this year's NOAA's outlook for the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season is calling for, well, below average normal season. The 2018 called for above average season, and we were well above that. Look at those. We had 23 named storms in 2018, 18 hurricanes, 10 major hurricanes. Major problems there, right? Then when we take a look at this year's outlook from NOAA, they were calling for 12 to 18 storms, about 5 that we've had so far, 2 hurricanes as well, and all of them in the month of June. So it's been pretty active start this season as well. The season begins on May 15th. Here you can see the storms that we've had so far. Again, 2 hurricanes. Erick now Category 4 as we watch it closely. When we take a look back at all of these storms, the next one on the list would be Flossie. We still have time in this month month to perhaps get another storm, which would be 6 in the month of June, just like we saw back in 2018. Now, as we look at the seasons, the Pacific hurricane season, it's quite different from the Atlantic hurricane season. In the Atlantic hurricane season, we tend to have a bit of a spike, right, in some of the numbers, especially once we get into September. But notice what happens in the Eastern Pacific. We get pretty active into June, but we kind of hold steady. A couple little peaks and valleys here, but nothing significant before we start to see a decrease once we get into October. So this is important. And one of the reasons we want to talk about hurricanes is not only do they affect Mexico, but we could see effects on the United States. Think of what happened earlier this year. Some of those brought some stormy conditions to California, the Southwest, where we lost a person due to flooding, and then some of that moisture made it all the way up into the northern plains. So you can see why the effects can sometimes have drastic effects on us here in the United States. And by the way, back in 2018, Hurricane Lane, which happened in August, not in June, brought 58 inches of rain to the eastern part of the Big Island. So it's important to study these. Doing some research on this, the team over at Colorado State University says they'd like to study more years like 2018. They say it was active due to little influence in the El Nino, but it was a combination of above sea surface temperatures and moisture, shear, during the month of August and September that contributed to the record season that was 2018. Again, no two seasons are the same. We don't know what's going to happen with this one, but we'll watch closely as we go through the year ahead.
Hey there, it's a new hour on Fox Weather. You're watching Weather Command. I'm Stephen Morgan.
Good morning. I'm Marissa Torres. Thanks for joining us. It is Thursday, June 19th. We've got a Fox Weather alert. Today, severe storms that are expected to march eastward, and that's going to target millions of folks right along the I-95 corridor. We've got a level 3 out of 5. That's what's indicated by that darker shade of red in the middle of your screen there. That's a level 3 out of 5 severe risk for weather when it comes to D.C., Philly, including Baltimore.
Speaking of 3, Erick, the first major hurricane of the season, making landfall as a Category 3, a powerful one. The latest that we've got from it with that landfall that occurred earlier this morning at 6 o'clock, making the landfall near Punta Maldonado in Mexico, 125-mile-per-hour winds. The category strength, I mean, this thing was up to a Cat 4, Marissa, this morning. And Britta and Craig covering it as it made that landfall, which was 6 a.m. locally, Eastern time. That was just last hour.
Yeah, I think looking into the state of Oaxaca was one we were focusing in on. The impacts of landfall can be so long-lasting, but waiting for that one moment where the center, the eye, starts to head further inland would be the exact moment of landfall, but still quite messy. You have very strong wind. You have very heavy rain battering this part of Mexico.
Yeah, it's an early named storm, right? Erick being the E-named storm earliest in the Eastern Pacific. Old record was Enrique, which was named back on June 25th, 2021. And the storm itself is going to start weakening. In fact, we saw that occur as it was making that approach to the shore. It was slow, paralleling the coast of Mexico for a while. A lot of unfortunate things when we look at this thing from a meteorological perspective. Obviously, the impact to life and property. This is a dangerous, life-threatening storm, as was described by the National Hurricane Center. We don't have a local radar network down there, so exactly tracking. And the thing that was unique about this storm, it was smaller, relatively speaking. The hurricane force winds, not expansive. So that core, that eye wall of Erick was very important and is also still very important to determine where we had the greatest impacts. Somewhere between San Marcos and Puerto Escondido. That's where we saw that landfall take place. This is well south of Acapulco. As it moved ashore, though, still a major hurricane and going to bring major problems. We've got a lot of rain associated with Erick still.
Yeah, you talk about the topography of this area in Mexico as well. That'll aid in really squeezing out even more moisture. So we could see over a foot of rain in spots, not to mention just the damaging winds and surge as a result. Puerto Escondido is one of those areas in through Oaxaca that was is being primarily impacted. An area where things were shut down, people were boarding up homes, schools are closed for good reason. Acapulco was also part of our story because it was just back in October of 2023 where they had Otis. It was a deadly hurricane. It was a very powerful hurricane. And so also going into just people are still rebuilding from that. There's still very visible damage.
as a result of Otis.
And we've had strong winds. One of the cameras that's been reliable for us out of Puerto Escondido, it's gone offline. Not sure the circumstances surrounding it, so we're not able to show you that live cam. So we are limited in our scope of what we're able to offer. Hurricane hunters were able to fly into this thing yesterday, getting some of that important data that could be ingested into forecast models like the Fox weather model. We're showing you what we see Erick doing throughout the day. It's going to continue pushing inland, but still hugging that coast. It doesn't look super enthused to move farther inland. This thing is going to be riding generally parallel to the Mexican coastline, which is not a great sign for the risk with the steep terrain. We got the mountains in Mexico, mudslides, landslides, all sorts of hazards from a freshwater flooding and heavy rain scenario that Erick is still going to bring because it's tapped into that tropical moisture, right?
Slowing down, it can really work against you. That was all the way into Friday afternoon. And remembering, though, we did get some weakening, I guess, before landfall. Its peak intensity was technically a Category 4 hurricane. A little bit of weakening didn't make it much better at that point, and this is a look at still the rain to come. Again, some areas could achieve well over a foot of rain over the next 36 hours.
An overperformer, and we're only 19 days into the month of June, early in the season. Okay, let's go back stateside now. Talk about the severe weather threat yesterday. And hey there, bottom of the hour. Welcome to Weather Command.
Yeah, brand new day and a Fox weather alert as we kick off this new half hour. We've got the threat for severe thunderstorms, that targeting millions of folks along the I-95 corridor, more spread out, probably more frequent than what we had even yesterday. But we'll be talking about that risk for Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, as well as Baltimore.
And Erick, the first major hurricane of the season, making landfall as a Category 3. Let's take it to the latest from the National Hurricane Center with that landfall stat of 6 a.m. having Erick make that landfall. 125-mile-per-hour winds, Category 3 hurricane, the pressure at 950 millibars, making that landfall well south of Acapulco, but no doubt that Acapulco is dealing with and has been dealing with the effects of Erick. Been a little bit of a break from, last time we saw a direct impact with Otis from Acapulco, but even from a perspective of seeing this happen, not common to get a landfalling hurricane this far south. Certainly not this early in the season to be dealing with a major hurricane.
That's what, looking at the stats and I guess still compiling some of that, but it was once a Category 4, landfall is a Category 3, so it did weaken before landfall, but to see that strength this early in the season, which typically doesn't come later, was something of note. Still, we have big impact to portions of the state of Oaxaca and even into the state of Guerrero. That's off to the west where Acapulco is. Heavy rain, wind, storm surge, everything you'd expect with a landfalling system. Yeah, the rain is going to be a big thing here as we look at the next couple of days, or I should actually say the next 24 hours. As we will see a significant weakening of Erick, the moisture is going to be hugging that Mexican coastline all the way up into Manzanillo. We'll see maybe along the coast anywhere between 5 to 8 inches of rain. So some significant rain to watch. And then also, Marissa, we've got another area in the Eastern Pacific to follow. The National Hurricane Center noting this area to watch with, what was it, a 20% chance of development. And so 20% chance of development, speaking to maybe we see a depression at some point, but it's still relatively low percentage odds of development. If nothing else, I think taking a look at how active the Eastern Pacific has been to already have our E-name storm and potentially our F-name storm, this has been a hotbed activity.
Chugs along, right? Yeah. Pedal to the metal.
Yeah. So we'll keep an eye, by the way, as we watch Hurricane Erick continue to make its movement into Mexico. As we bring it back stateside, Wednesday was another day of severe thunderstorms here at home. The Tennessee-North Carolina state line, in fact, seeing some flash flooding right along I-40. Keeping in mind, this is just months after Hurricane Helene.
Now, yes, the heat is the big story, but something that's been catching folks' eye is actually the Atlantic Basin, where we have our first invest of the Atlantic season, so 2025. Now, Eastern Pacific, a whole new can of worms there, which we'll kind of dive in later on in the show. But over the next 2 days, only given about a 60% chance of development. So we're in that medium to subtly high category, but it has actually died down over the last little bit. What we're seeing right now is areas of some thunderstorm development that's moving a bit further north. We've got a low pressure system here, but it would have to shed all of its frontal boundaries in order to become a purely tropical system. A lot of times as it begins to interact with the jet stream and move further north into what some refer to as the graveyard of the Atlantic for tropical systems, it just doesn't seem like it'll have enough time to do it. So in my perspective, Andrea, I'm giving it maybe a 50-50 shot. NHC kind of with me there, giving it 60%. I kind of want to stay quiet on the June side. We haven't had no name storm in June since 2019, so it's been a minute. The area of low-level spin still identifiable on Tuesday as it slides further north, but it will interact with a lot more wind shear in the environment, and that will rapidly weaken any chance that it would have to develop. And in addition to that, we have some cooler waters. Typically what happens, though, with these early season trying to do something storms is you'll have a lot of disagreement in the models. They are not so sure what's going to happen because that center of low pressure hasn't formed. But within these models, it's actually really concise. They have a great idea as to what's going to happen with this storm, which to me just indicates that there's not a lot of room for error. It has this narrow window, and that's all it has. It's got 24 hours, and up until that point, it will not really have any kind of chance whatsoever. The good news with this, whether it becomes Andrea or not, we've got a couple island chains here in the Atlantic, and we've got Bermuda on the other side of that X there. And it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. So even if we had Andrea, even if it, stays an invest, it's not going to be impacting really anybody. So it's just a subtle nod to, hey, the Atlantic hurricane season is still here. We're about a month in now, and things will only increase and get more and more active throughout the latter part of the summer and into the fall. A few things that we look at just beyond kind of where that invest is in the North Subtropical Atlantic, but further towards the main development region. Saharan dust, hostile winds, and the fast trade winds. Saharan dust typically peaks in June and July. Then we have another peak that'll come in the month of October. We also look for a hostile wind environment that would rapidly shear out a developing tropical system. So very different methods of forecasting if you compare severe storms where you want wind shear in the environment to a tropical system where they want absolutely calm water and air. In addition to surface wind or the winds aloft, the surface winds are also howling pretty fast. So that's creating that wind shear in the environment that would shear out any kind of system. But it is also actually cooling off some of the water. So right now we are running right around average, if not slightly below average for the water temps for the main development region, but also for the Caribbean. As far as late June, early July goes, drier than average for the MDR, so that should effectively shut down any tropical wave development. Increased rains with some scattered showers and thunderstorms here, but we'll see what happens. It doesn't look like we'll get a tropical system, but truly it's the Eastern Pacific where we could have our F name storm coming right down the line.
Talked about this too much yet. We've been talking about the Atlantic. This right here, we've got that's a nice wave. Doesn't look so bad. That's Nicaragua right there. You can see the wave starting to break right here. We have a weak area of circulation at this point, but it could stem into Flossie by late this week or into the weekend. Nice picture right there, though. Not too bad. Look at the temperature of the water. 83 degrees, so well above the threshold. You want about 80 or more to get a tropical storm to develop and strengthen even more. A lot of cloud cover out there, at least around the immediate coastline. All right, what about that Invest 95E? This was just named a little bit ago. You can see the way it looks. We circled it out for you at this point. Not too concerned with it in the near future. It's more like late this week into the weekend as we see this area of low pressure. It's real broad at this point. Begins to pull itself together. It gets a little more consolidated, but right now it is a 10% shot over the next 2 days, up to 70% shot for the next 7 days. And again, if it happens, it'll be late to the week, talking about Thursday, Friday, maybe into Saturday. Here is the way it looks on that visible satellite imagery, and I love showing you guys this, but you can really see the inner workings of what's going on. There is a weak circulation. If you'll get it right there, I mean, that's just temporary. It's not going to last much longer. It's this entire broad area of circulation that we're watching. It will probably pull itself together over the next few days. Not within the next 2. It's more like a couple days from now. All right, what about the water temperatures? There are some pockets of temperatures that are above 85, so you do have some warm water to work with for sure. Some cooler pockets also. That's cooler than the average. You see the blue, but still just a hair below 80 degrees. Look at some of these temperature readings right here. Upper 80s where you see the darker shade. So that's hugging the coastline especially. Warmer water temperatures are here. But that broad area, it's actually been extended on out. You can see that region right there. That's where we're watching for concern. Watch where it goes from here. Wednesday, you can see the circulation starting to pull itself together just a little bit. By Friday, though, it takes on more of that circulation, that look to it, like a tropical system. This is Sunday, pretty close to the coastline. We'll see where it goes if it does, in fact, form as Flossie. That would be our next named storm, something we're watching for sure. All right, listen, we got other stuff to talk about. We've got the tropics that are coming alive, kind of. I mean, this is the tropical storm, brand new one out there in the Atlantic. That is Andrea, 40-mile-per-hour winds at this point. It's not going to bother anybody, but it's just something you check mark off. We've got our first A storm. On average, we see our first named storm in the Atlantic on June 20th. And today is a little bit later than that. What are we, the 24th? Yeah, so we're 4 days past that. So just a little bit behind schedule. That's about it. I'm going to show you the board right now. Where is it located? I mean, it is so far away. We're not even too concerned with it at this point. But, yeah, it was looking like a total dud. And this is what Brian Norcross had to say. Andrea is the ultimate flash-in-the-pan type storm. Conditions came together just briefly, so the system met the criteria, and thunderstorms might flare up again later on tonight. But that will likely be it. Hostile winds and cooler ocean water temperatures should end Andrea tomorrow. That's a hurricane specialist, Brian Norcross. Totally agree. If you look at this, you're looking at this live with me, everybody. Look at the big thunderstorms across the middle part of that circulation. It's in the circle right there. Basically, not there. They may flare up again, like you said, over the next few hours. But right now, when you look at the visible satellite imagery, you can see the circulation for sure. You just don't see the big thunderstorms ringing around the center of circulation. So that's why it's not going to last too much longer. 40-mile-per-hour winds, and it's whipping to the east-northeast at about 17 miles per hour. Pressure's only about 10-14, so not a very deep one, but it should hold together as a tropical storm for the rest of the day. Overnight tonight, it should start falling apart, and by tomorrow at this time, it will have lost all its tropical characteristics. But you can see it looks pretty good with that visible satellite imagery, and that's why they called it a tropical storm. That's that center of circulation right there. You can see the winds as they wrap around that thing pretty well. A lot of shear just coming at you, and it's going over some much cooler water temperatures. So that's why it's not going to last much longer at all. And it's also going to much drier air, too. Look at the sea surface temperatures. And when you start seeing temperatures that are a lighter shade of green, right now it's in the 70s. You need about an 80-degree benchmark for this thing to either retain strength or gain strength. And that 80-degree line is way far down to the south, right? Here's Bermuda right there. You can see how far away it is and moving in that direction. Look at the cooler temperatures right there. That's where you have your temperatures into the mid to upper 60s. So that's going to track right into the colder stuff. Also, it runs right into the wind. Look at this little batch right there, the shear. Those are 40 to 50-mile-per-hour winds that will help buzz down the thunderstorms. This thing is going to have not many lives left. You can see as it moves up to the north and to the east, there's your circulation, the energy, essentially the vorticity spinning around it. It gets sheared apart pretty quickly. There goes the cold front. It's going to push it out to sea, and then that's it. It's just one for the record books that it is our A-name storm. All the models in total agreement on where this thing goes. That's the consensus. So, yeah, like we said, usually get the A-name storm on June 20th. It's not 24th. We usually don't get our next B-name storm until July 17th. So we'll see what happens. So right now, other than that, the tropics are dead. So that's good. All right.
This is a Hurricane HQ alert. The Atlantic is powering up. We now have Tropical Storm Barry in the Bay of Campeche. We also have tropical storm warnings that are in effect for parts of Mexico's east coast. We'll break down the factors at play and any impacts to the continental United States. Plus, tropical trouble also brewing in the Gulf off the Atlantic coast as well and toward the Carolinas. We'll break that down. And of course, the 4th of July travel rush is on the way with more than 72 million Americans traveling this holiday week. Fox Weather's Robert Ray is one of them. He's trekking across I-85 from Atlanta to the Big Easy, giving you the conditions on the roads from the Fox Weather Beast. All that and so much more coming up right now on Weather Command Weekend. Good morning. Thanks for joining us here on Fox Weather. I'm Michael Estime alongside Jane Menard. Big news within the past few minutes. We now have several tropical storms that we're tracking.
Barry, I'll be honest, Michael.
I know.
I wasn't expecting this.
Yeah.
I was not. And here we are. And it was like that, like, Hail Mary throw.
It really was.
Whatever it is, the half-court shot.
Yeah, that's exactly it. This is, let's get you to the graphics real quick and show you what we're tracking, because Tropical Storm Barry just crossed over that threshold of about, 39 miles per hour or so. That is what we need to see sustained, and I'm going to show it to you in just a second, sustained within the core of the system to consider this a tropical storm. And we have that. So Tropical Storm Barry right now winds at 40 miles per hour. Its movement toward the northwest at about 6. Barometric pressure has fallen, aka meaning that it has strengthened. I believe it was at 110 inches of mercury in our last update, or millibars rather. It's now at 1,006. Here's what we were looking at, and this is the reason why it's now been upgraded from a tropical depression 2 to now Tropical Storm Barry. You'll notice that as the hurricane hunters were flying through the center of what they considered the center of circulation, there was clearly an area, and let me highlight this and really emphasize, there was a duration of time where they saw and they measured tropical storm force winds. And for that reason, that's the reason why we have the indication now of Tropical Storm Barry. Want to bring in Jane Menard into the conversation. Jane, as you said, somewhat unexpected to see this.
This is kind of surprising to me, because the overall satellite presentation is really messy. And I mean, listen, it is so imperative that we have the hurricane hunters out there right now. They are flying. It is the real deal, right? They are in this storm. So, you know, it's hard to kind of question that. But it is still something, you know, we check off another name, and the impacts, they don't change. It's the same thing. Right. You know, to the coast of Mexico, we have the expectation that rain is going to continue to pour down. We'll see that ring out in the mountainous terrain as well in the next 24, 48 hours. Water temperatures are there. And, you know, the only thing I can think is that's happened here is that the coast, being so close to the coast, has aided in a little bit of that added spin. Sometimes if you can have that influence, it can be just enough. Because listen, the time was running out. By the end of the day today, Barry is going to be onshore.
We only might have a tropical storm. Maybe 6 hours.
What's the deal? Because Andrea was only a tropical storm for like 12. So these short-lived kind of impulses of tropical activity, but it's just enough to check off a name from the list. So we'll see. I mean, hostile winds are still going to continue to shear apart this circulation, and that's only growing as this system continues to lift up to the north.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's going to be influenced by a number of different factors that are going to degrade the quality of the system very quickly. You know, not just the upstairs winds or the hostile winds up there, but also it's running into land. It's like 6 hours away from landfall is what we're anticipating. Landfall, I should say, later on this evening, so perhaps a little later than that. But nevertheless, it's going to be very short-lived. It'll run over land. Impacts, as you mentioned, still the same. National Hurricane Center saying that this thing could pick up winds of 40 to 45 miles per hour. So currently it's at 40 miles per hour. So 5 miles per hour, I mean, not the biggest deal ever. But I think just in terms of classification and nomenclature, it's important to at least identify it as a tropical storm at this point.
Take this and kind of store it in the back of my head. I feel like we've been burned by this before, where you don't think it's going to happen. But I'm telling you, there's something about the coast of Mexico, the east coast of Mexico, especially in the Bay of Campeche, the way that we have the curvature of the land. It's just enough. So count me in next time.
We
get a system like this, Michael. But the moisture will be something we'll be following. Now, this morning they found that the center of Barry, well, then was TD2, was a little farther to the south. And I think that might have some influence on the tropical moisture lifting up to the north. Because if you notice, those deeper blues, they really are shunted more so into Mexico as opposed to lifting up into South Texas. So maybe a slightly improved forecast for spots like Brownsville, Corpus Christi. Obviously, the heaviest of the rain is going to be in Mexico, where we could see with the mountainous terrain. That's the influence of the actual mountain themselves, with upwards of maybe 5 to 8+ inches of rain. But in Texas, you know, we will see some scattered showers and thunderstorms take us at least through Monday into early Tuesday. I think the coverage could be a little more isolated at times. We'll see.
Yeah, there, and I also think about there's a lot of folks that, of course, vacation to South Padre Island. Huge popular spot down there, not too far from Brownsville. An area where we're going to be watching for United States impacts from what at this point will perhaps be just remnant moisture from
rebuilding. We've got to talk about the tropics because we have an area to watch that has now been designated right over the state of Florida. And this is going to be for a stalled out cold front that could spin up some kind of area of low pressure along it much later on this week. Not expecting anything today, Monday, Tuesday. This is going to be more like Thursday or Friday. It's a low chance. We'll keep you updated. And we've got a lot of people that'll be traveling this week. So we've got to check out the forecast across the nation because there will be some impactful weather. That's for sure. All right, let's talk about the tropics. I mentioned we've got that area to watch down in Florida, or kind of the Gulf off both coasts of Florida. And then we've got an actual tropical storm that's active right now here in the western Gulf. This is Tropical Storm Barry. It was named not terribly long ago. It was a little bit earlier on today. And it's not a very pretty tropical storm. It's not very well put together, and that's always a good thing because it doesn't really look like it has any chance at strengthening into a hurricane. It's also not going to affect the United States. So again, I will repeat that. This is not going to affect the United States. This is going to barrel right into Mexico and then lose its strength very quickly. Now, when I say it's not a very well put together tropical storm, what do I mean? Well, you can see the center of this thing at the surface when you zoom in on the visible satellite imagery. It actually is a little bit fascinating to see. Check this out. It will emerge here as we put the loop on. It's this right here. Look at that. You see the counterclockwise spin there? That's the surface. Low. That's the surface spin. And then you see all these big clouds up here. Those are the tops of the thunderstorms that are trying to wrap themselves around the center. But this is what we call a lopsided storm. This is not a storm that typically gets all that strong. The stronger storms will tend to have a lot of this convection, the thunderstorms, wrapped very tightly around the center. And as you can clearly see, we don't have that. Now, when we're looking at the visible satellite here, obviously there are a lot of high clouds that make it a little bit tough to see that spin down at the surface, but for a brief little time, you can see it there. And if you look really closely, you can follow it as we go forward in the loop. Just kind of follow where that center of low pressure is. It looks like it's starting to move a little bit faster. This thing's going to make landfall tonight before that area of low pressure at the surface kind of disappears under those high clouds. So a couple hours until landfall for this one, and that's going to be that with Barry. A very brief storm, not going to become a hurricane. There are some tropical storm warnings, though, that are in effect along the east coast of Mexico. And if you want to see what it looks like on the forecast model, it's going to be a lot of rain. That'll be the #1 threat that we'll have to deal with from this one as it moves ashore. You can see it transfers very quickly into a tropical depression and then probably a post-tropical or non-tropical low, just an area of low pressure that sits around. Now, I know this one is going to perk up a lot of ears and eyes, right? This big area to watch that includes a large portion of the state of Florida, and especially after what we dealt with last year. I know a lot of people are going to be paying very close attention to this. Now, yes, it's a good idea to be prepared, and you need to watch this closely if you live down in Florida, but also at the same time, I don't want you to get too overly worried about this because this is a small chance that a storm could develop, and it's not until several days from now. So you do have some time to, maybe you haven't quite made your preparations yet. In case something happens, yeah, you've got some time to do that. But here we are. In the next 7 days, 20% chance of development. And really, we're talking more about like Thursday and Friday in the upcoming work week. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, nothing will happen. This is actually going to be a stalled out cold front. It's the front that's over the United States right now. It's actually pretty far up toward the northwest. And it's going to take a couple of days to barrel through the U.S., get off of the coast, and then do what is kind of a frequent situation early on in the season where we tend to see a front that will just set up shop bisecting the state of Florida. And sometimes what can happen is you get an area of low pressure that can develop along that front. And because it's that time of year when the water's a little bit on the warm side in some of these spots, if you get a little area of low pressure that's pretty weak, it can gain some steam pretty quickly. So again, area to watch. That's called that for a reason. This is not a potential tropical cyclone yet. It's not a tropical depression. There's actually none of this stuff that you see in here. None of that thunderstorm activity has anything to do with why that area to watch is there. So again, it's the cold front that's over the U.S. right now. It gets off the coast, sets up shop over Florida, could get an area of low pressure develop along that front. And the interesting thing here is we don't really know yet whether, first off, if a low will develop along that front, and secondly, whether if it does form, it ends up west of Florida or east of Florida. Now, there is a little bit of a higher chance on the forecast models showing that it goes east of Florida, or it develops east of Florida, so somewhere off the southeast coast. There still is a chance, though, that it could be up in the northeastern Gulf. And again, the chances at ending up with like a hurricane or something like that really do appear very low overall, at least right now. Okay, so we'll continue to watch this closely. We are your Hurricane HQ. We've got Brian Norcross that's watching this closely, and he doesn't seem too overly concerned quite yet. So it's kind of like watching the flight attendant when there's turbulence on a plane, right? When Norcross perks his ears up, that's when I start to get a little worried. Either way, don't focus too much on whether this becomes a tropical depression or maybe a brief tropical storm. Point is, we're going to have a stalled out front sitting over Florida over the time frame of several days. So this is going to be some very heavy rain. Any way you cut it, 8 to 12 inches for some spots.
Let's take you to the tropics to kick off our show. Yes, we did have a tropical storm make landfall in Mexico last night, and now it continues to fall apart. So here's a live look into Mexico this morning. You can see we have some wet pavement, but overall, things not going too badly, which is great news to pass along. This was a fairly weak tropical system, and thankfully it is moving, but it will continue to bring some heavy rain. So now Barry, nothing but a remnant low. So here's the latest from the National Hurricane Center. Just got an update from them. The winds are down to 30 miles per hour, but also, more importantly, this no longer is a tropical system. So what happens in this type of development? De-development, however you want to look at it. Well, we're just going to see some scattered showers and storms continue across parts of Mexico today. So, of course, heavy rain can always be a concern. With the prevailing wind patterns across North Mexico, we are getting some of this moisture moving into South Texas. So thunderstorms are possible today from Victoria into Corpus Christi all the way down towards Brownsville. Pretty limited issue. This time of year, you can get thunderstorms by themselves across South Texas, but a couple tropical downpours not out of the question. Again, it's because this prevailing wind pattern that's bringing some of that moisture from what was Barry all the way up into parts of South Texas. Now, of course, North Mexico, that's where we're going to see the majority of our showers and thunderstorms today. Tampico all the way up to the border. You can see these thunderstorms, especially enhanced by daytime heating, and those thunderstorms will produce some brief heavy rain. Anything that is somewhat associated with what is left over of Barry will be out of the weather story by tomorrow. So again, this is kind of a one-hit wonder on a Monday. Again, the landfall last night. So here's a look at the rain totals for North Mexico. It's plentiful. I mean, 5 to 8 inches of rain just today is going to lead to that potential for flash flooding and, of course, mudslides and higher terrain and places where we have elevation, big old mountains across parts of North Mexico. So flooding is probably going to be the largest potential. Even though this is a remnant low, this is tropical moisture, and that is going to lead to a flash flood concern. For South Texas, 1 to 2 inches rain possible. So not really looking at a flood potential. With that in mind, sometimes a tropical downpour can cause an isolated issue in South Texas. But overall, this looks to be beneficial rain. We do have drought across the area, so 1 to 2 inches of rain could be beneficial to them. Here's a look at the timeline for South Texas today. Again, a couple showers possible this morning. Daytime heating and also the moisture left over from Barry will combine into a very busy afternoon. So if you're on South Padre Island, folks, I mean, it's 4th of July week. Probably many of you tried to get your vacation plans set and you're there starting your vacation today. Get the beach time in early. These thunderstorms this afternoon will end your beach time, not only with the heavy rain potential, but also because we are going to have some rough surf and we will have plenty of lightning with those thunderstorms as well. But weather conditions do look better as we head into your Tuesday. So that's a look at Barry. I know, Winkin, you missed it. We're off to having our second name off of the list, and eyes are set on the third. We do have an area to watch across the southeast coastline. We'll get to that story in just a moment.
And we now have Tropical Depression 3. This is at the 5 p.m. advisory. Wind speed sustained at 35 miles per hour. Pressure millibar well north of 1,000. But notice the storm movement. A slow crawl to the north at 2 miles an hour. That means it has more time over water and likely to become a tropical storm as early as tomorrow. And that would be Tropical Storm Chantal. So when we look at this, that cone is a reflection of where the center of this could move. Remember, the impacts are well beyond where the cone is at. So likely from Savannah all the way out towards Wilmington is where the center of circulation could move over and could potentially make landfall. That cone will adjust as we move through Saturday and Sunday. Why I encourage you to continue to check in with us here at Fox Weather, especially if you have loved ones or if you are watching in the Southeast, because we know it's 4th of July, a lot of people heading to the beach. Those are the ones that are going to feel the most of the impact as we have the tropical storm force winds that start as early as tomorrow and last through Sunday. The rain is the greatest risk, though. That's what we said from the start of this event when we were talking about it on Monday and Tuesday. Will it be tropical, non-tropical? Did not matter the amount of rain. Right now, likely 2 to 4 inches of rain widespread, and isolated amounts could get up to 6 inches of rain. That's a half foot of rain throughout this event. Why we got to this designation of a tropical depression is because of our brave men and women working on the holiday, flying into this. Out of Biloxi midday, got there about 2 p.m. Eastern time, and been flying in it ever since. It's the C-130. Low-level circulation was found. This system is still disorganized. It's very lopsided. It's fighting hostile winds that are on the northern side of this. And because of that, you're looking at not a fully complete system, and why it's a slow evolution to a tropical storm here in the next 24 to 36 hours. You're looking at this staying at a just below tropical storm force wind throughout their entire flight. This is the ensemble run where the lows could track, and I would say that the overall trend, notice where we have, of course, the cone, but many of these models are hinting at maybe a budge to the south before it gets carried north. I bring that to your attention because if you're in Savannah, you're in Tybee Island, you're in Brunswick, maybe you're in Jacksonville, those spots you're looking, well, I'm way south. I'm looking at the rain. It's looking like it's going to be the Carolinas. I should be fine. This could have some adjustments in the days ahead, and why you want to look at the potential flash flooding that's possible. I'm going to bring out the exclusive Fox weather model because this is a tropical model. This is one of many that we use, but what you're looking at is when this starts to emerge and you have this low pressure here. So we're going to block out the rest of the noise that's on the screen. And when you're looking at the counterclockwise rotation, that puts areas like Charleston out towards Wilmington, Myrtle Beach, and low country of South Carolina in the path of that onslaught of rain. Again, it's slow moving, so that could be an extended amount of time as that rain goes. Notice it's moving inland now, and it's still going to be able to tap into that moisture that's coming in off of the Atlantic, and why this is going to play through Sunday, and by Monday is when we're starting to see the jet stream start to guide it back out over water. If you're in the mid-Atlantic, you're in Virginia, Maryland, out towards Delaware, those spots right now, a lot of uncertainty of what could happen there. But depending on the overall track and where this steers to, you could even feel some of that rain in the days ahead. Overall, though, the Isle of Palms, where we hosted the Fox Weather Beach House earlier this week, they were having fun out there. They were telling you how to plan for a summer vacation. Now is prepping for the potential storms that are, or the storm that could come in as early as tomorrow. Notice a light chop, if anything, there as many of these boats are kind of going to and from. This is the river inlet that leads you, obviously, to the Atlantic at times. It looks like a great day to celebrate the 4th of July. The holiday weekend could evolve quickly.
We have a Fox weather alert this morning. Welcome back. We are just hearing, Kathy, from the National Hurricane Center, and they have just upgraded this tropical depression now to tropical storm Chantal.
There it is. Maximum sustained winds 40 miles an hour. Very slow movement moving north at just 2 miles an hour. And you can see we had alerts saying that it was strengthening. And here we go with this latest update. So we have our third tropical system of the season so far.
Isn't that wild? It's been a slow go in the Atlantic basin for sure. And now here we go. We are in the seas, as you mentioned, and that rain is going to be pushing on shore with time as well. Our Mike Seidel is along the beaches of South Carolina. We'll be checking with him coming up in a few minutes. But yeah, that is a big update from the National Hurricane Center.
Now, earlier when we spoke with Mike,
again, we are following this very closely. In addition, of course, to the breaking news now just coming out of the southeastern United States.
Absolutely. You know, the Fox Forecast Center eyeing what is now our newly minted tropical storm Chantal. off the southeast coast. It was just newly upgraded within the past hour or so.
That's right, and we've got our own Mike Seidel live in South Carolina at Folly Beach. Mike, you were just talking about this a few minutes ago, the expectation that this was going to become a tropical storm, and now here we are, as it appears the storm has been strengthening.
Yeah, now 40 mile an hour, so it's a minimal low-grade tropical storm. It doesn't really change the story as far as the impacts go. The number one impact by far will be the locally heavy rain, especially along and where the center comes on shore north of here, sometime late tonight, but more than likely sometime Sunday morning. Maybe before sunrise, maybe just after sunrise. It's a broad center at this point. Sustained winds 40 miles an hour. It's moving north at 2, but it's expected to move more north and northeast and pick up some forward speed. The pressure is 1,009 millibars. Now, to put this in perspective, yesterday, when it was upgraded to a tropical depression at 5 Eastern, it was 1,013. So the pressure's only come down 4 millibars. What I'm trying to say is this is not going to rapidly intensify. It's not expected to between shear and dry air and not being that well organized. It's really loaded on the east side like we see a lot of these weaker systems. We don't expect it to become any more than a tropical storm. The official forecast, and they'll update that in 3 hours at 11 Eastern from the Hurricane Center, is it to increase to 45 miles an hour. With that said, if you get a gust 40 to 45, it probably is not going to cause any structural damage, likely not to knock out any power, little if any power. Once again, re-emphasizing the rain. And then on these beaches, you'll have the wave action and certainly the rip currents, especially on the South Carolina coast up towards, say, Wrightsville. And you can see the surface up right now. We've got some surfers out there. There's a gentleman catching a wave right now, coming on in, and up, there he goes down into the water. Water temp, low 80s. Not too shabby. Hey, let me take you back to yesterday. Friday, July 4th, Folly Beach. Boy, I tell you, the weather was epic. They did cancel the fireworks. That's a story for another day. And you can see where everybody was. Now, this is not 2 or 3 p.m. This is about 6:30, 6:45 last night. People just enjoying the late day, late evening, or early evening sunshine with temperatures in the mid-80s and a nice breeze off the water. Speaking of breezes, we've got the east-northeast wind around the periphery of the center, and we've got this one rain shower. We'll show you that on radar, this band that came in as expected, and it's just about over with. We're talking 5 to 7 minutes. Never rained very hard here. This is about as hard as it's rained. Maybe you can hear it on my jacket. Heavier rain by far was up north, up the coast towards Pawleys and up towards Litchfield Beach, and that's all rotating in around the center. As we go through later today and tonight, we'll see more of these bands and more in the way of heavy rainfall later tonight into Sunday morning. And then it goes inland, and that's really it. So it's a short impact, a minimal impact as far as property cost and power outages. I just don't think it's going to be that much of a problem, more of the rain. The real problem is that a lot of folks are paying a lot of money to be on these beaches this weekend, and the beach weather tomorrow is going to be really not good. In fact, today, it's not great at all either, although we'll probably get some more sunshine in here in between the showers. Michael? Tom?
Well, Mike, thank you so much. Yeah, like you said, everyone's there for the 4th of July holiday, and here comes the weather, right?
Literally raining on the parade.
Yes. Well, Mike, thank you so much, and we'll check in with you again here shortly with the latest on Chantal. Well, back to Texas and the...
Well, Tropical Storm Chantal, it's moving onto the South Carolina coast. We're watching this in the next 12 hours or so. Right now, still sitting just offshore, but boy, is it churning up those waves. We've begun to see the impacts here. And as we get into tomorrow morning, definitely could be in the mix of it all. Thomas Bell from Horry County Emergency Management joins us now. Thomas, right at the Cedar County, you've got Myrtle Beach. We're a big popular destination here on the 4th of July weekend. What's it been like for your team preparing for this storm?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Right off the bat, you are correct. Busy holiday weekend. So our big thing with this storm has just been all about the messaging, making sure that both residents and visitors are aware of just the different conditions that are likely going to occur over the next 24 hours here, as well as just some of the hazards associated with that. Knowing that it's a big beach weekend, knowing the rip current threat was going to be high, the rough surf, really trying to hammer that out the last 24 hours, making sure folks were aware that it was not a great time to be going into the ocean past what your capabilities are.
Given what we see with Tropical Storm Chantal, would you say that's probably one of the most dire impacts from this storm when we look into the next, day or two once we see that landfall? Because the waves, there are a lot of people who want to get to the beach, but that is a dangerous time. And also, too, I'm just noting the time lifeguards are off duty at this point, right?
Yeah, so it's always when we have these storm events, it's the 12, 24 hours prior to the storm actually getting close to us. Because yesterday, if you were at the beach, we had a moderate risk of rip currents all across the Horry County coastline, but it was sunny skies. It was a beautiful day. This morning, we started seeing some of those outer rain bands. So I think folks were more aware of there is a storm a bit more imminent. So I'm sure the beaches were not nearly as crowded today as they were yesterday for the 4th. So it's really making sure folks understand that just because we're not seeing the rain and the wind yet, there are still risks associated with these tropical systems. And that's why we really got the messaging out starting yesterday about it. Obviously, now we're kind of shifting gears as it gets a little bit closer to the South Carolina coast. Where is that rain going to fall, that flash flood threat? A little bit of storm surge, nothing super significant in terms of what we've seen here in the Horry County area. But knowing there are visitors in town, telling them, hey, if you're in a low-lying immediate coastal area, be a bit mindful of where you leave your vehicle tonight during the high tide cycle and certainly tomorrow as well.
Absolutely. This is the first tropical storm of the season, the first impact to the United States, and it's right off your coast, right off the county there. So what's your messaging, especially too, as we continue into this hurricane season? We still have a long ways to go for the residents in Horry County, but anybody who could be coming to visit throughout these summer months and throughout the hurricane season, even into fall.
Yeah, we tell folks throughout the entirety of the year, well before the start of hurricane season, is you need to have a plan, you need to be prepared. Obviously, Tropical Storm Chantal is not going to be what was considered probably the big storm for anyone this season, but it does act as a dress rehearsal. It does get folks to kind of wake up and understand, hey, okay, hurricane season is here. We'll see some minor impacts likely from this storm, sporadic throughout the county, but we want folks to stay ready. Maybe they felt a little unease going into this storm. Maybe they felt a little unprepared. So hopefully that gives them the initiative to go and get the rest of the way prepared for the rest of the season. Like I said, this is a storm that we've seen this before. We get an early season tropical storm, and then usually peak hurricane season, something a little more powerful comes our way. So this just kind of acts as a little bit of a wake-up call. Hopefully for all folks, both here in Horry County, South Carolina, and the everywhere on the coast that can be impacted by these storms.
Certainly, certainly. So getting the word out there. Thomas Bell, thank you for the time on this busy weekend. I'm sure you guys got a big team to handle as you prepare for the impact. So appreciate you coming on to Fox Weather. We wish you guys the best. Happy 4th from the Horry County Emergency Management Team. Thank you. Let's check in on what's going on in the Eastern Pacific. It was off to a really fast start to the season. We've 2 areas to watch. Invest 96E, which perhaps has the greatest opportunity to take in our next name off the list, and then an area to watch back behind it. It doesn't have a ton of thunderstorm development along with it, but models are indicating that we'll probably see that start to blossom as we get towards the later half of this week upcoming. So here's the latest. Invest 96E, 30-mile-per-hour winds, still very disorganized. We don't have that clear center of circulation. Here's a look at the enhanced satellite in the last few hours. Certainly some broad circulation out there, but nothing that's really kind of confined or congealed around that center. Warm waters, that's certainly going to help with that thunderstorm growth, and we are expecting for this system to remain in that pocket of warmth, at least for the time being. We do still have some cooler waters out ahead of it that have cooled down from storms past. And also, too, we have that shelf, that drop off, the farther north off to the west we get, that is going to eventually start to erode away the storm. Take a look at this. So Invest 96E, we call it an invest because we're quite simply investigating this system. And we get to run special weather models. And so this is an idea of the spaghetti model, those ensembles that are going to track the center of this storm. You've got some models that are going to want to take it down to the south, but the overall consensus is truly due off to the west. And so we will see the system stay offshore. There's that spin picking up in intensity. I think probably about early this week, we'll see something come together, tropical depression, perhaps a tropical storm. The next on the list would be Gil.
Look how many we've already checked off here. Alvin, Barbara, Cosme, Dalila, and then, of course, Erick and Flossie, which were our major hurricanes of the season. But we'll continue to follow. We are certainly ahead of schedule here.
It's one of those deals where you look at the flooding there, and then you look at what's going on in South Carolina, and, you know, there's some possible pockets of flooding there, too.
Absolutely.
Certainly not as significant.
Yeah, tropical trouble brewing really in both basins, the Atlantic and also the Pacific this holiday weekend. Let's take a look, show you what's going on with Tropical Storm Chantal, which made landfall this morning at about 4 a.m. Eastern time, just south of Myrtle Beach. And that made landfall. Winds were as high as 60 miles per hour with this overnight. So it did strengthen a little bit, but we're expecting rapid weakening now that it's reached land. This is going to turn from a wind and rain event to a rain event as it heads inland. So this is going to include places like Raleigh-Durham in North Carolina, and the inland portions here of North Carolina, not quite as far west, though, as Asheville. I think the heavy rain is going to stay east of the Asheville area, but again, could have some flight delays. Wilmington has had over an inch or two of rain already, so we're going to be dealing with that right up into, again, Raleigh-Durham and into Virginia as well, as heavy rain now becomes the main threat with the tropical storm that is going to be weakening here with time, Michael.
Yeah, you know, a couple of things I want to point out is the fact that I was looking at radar just a moment ago, and there are some showers and thunderstorms associated with it. And I do want to mention the fact that there is a tornadic threat as well that the Storm Prediction Center has highlighted. Not a significant threat, but it's there nonetheless. Winds at times towards Spring-Maid Pier, again, upwards of what? 55 to near 60 miles per hour.
And a couple of power outages here and there. But as we talked to Mike Seidel, this isn't a major storm, but it's more of a nuisance storm, as again we have these winds circulating around. But because this system feeds off of the warm ocean water, once it hits land, it starts to weaken, and then rain becomes the issue. Take a look at these flood watches in effect: Asheboro, Greensboro, Raleigh, and Fayetteville as well.
Yeah, look at this camera. My goodness, North Topsail, you can see those birds there flying
They're
on
getting
by.
out of there.
They sure are getting out of Dodge. Winds, though, sustained at 16 miles per hour, gusting even higher than that. You look at the big-time surf. This has been a huge issue. The rip current risk out there. It's one of the reasons why, you know, we're really telling folks, let's stay out of the water. I think tomorrow and then Tuesday look a lot nicer than today. But, you know, speaking from experience, that those currents can literally drag you into the water. You want to make sure that you stay out. Not to mention the fact that we have 6 to 10 foot wave action that we're seeing right now as well.
Right, so it's multifaceted, right?
Correct.
From a threat standpoint, it's not just the wind, it's not just the rain, it's the waves, the rip currents, all of that combined when you're talking about a tropical system.
Absolutely, and so it's one of the reasons why you look at the coastline, and it's not just where the system made landfall, it actually stretches all the way down toward what we call the first coast, toward Jacksonville and Jacksonville Beach, down toward Daytona, and even as you head toward, say, the Kennedy Space Center and the Space Coast, there's also going to be that moderate rip current risk as well.
Absolutely, and that's where, again, we've got to watch all of these different scenarios, right? And then let's look off to the west as well. Remember yesterday we were talking about the potential of a tropical system in the Pacific, which could have been Gil, although it looks like now, and according to the latest data, this isn't really organizing. So we're not expecting a whole lot of development out there in the Eastern Pacific.
Yeah, it's interesting, too, because this is actually a bubble in a region in the Pacific Ocean right now where the water temperatures are really warm, but there's a couple other factors that are somewhat limiting the development. You look at the wind shear, for example, and perhaps this is getting a little bit more wobbly, if you will. So there's no condensed area of circulation, which we would typically look for strengthening development of a potential tropical system out this way, which it almost kind of feels like for the first time in the Eastern Pacific this year, it feels like finally we've actually seen a decrease in what looked like something that could possibly develop.
Right, it's been so busy out there, right? I mean, not busy in the Atlantic, very busy in the Pacific. And now, of course, we're not seeing anything, thankfully, too organized out there in the Pacific.
Yeah, so if you have friends or family that are perhaps going to be going to some of those vacation destinations, you can, of course, see where Puerto Vallarta is, Cabo San Lucas is, very popular vacation destinations. At least for now, Tom, we're sounding the all clear for folks that might be traveling out this way.
Yes, certainly some good news. Well, guess what?
We'll get to all the Texas stuff in just a minute. Obviously, an incredibly important story. I want to talk about Tropical Storm Chantal. That was the first tropical system that's made landfall in the United States so far this year. It made landfall in Litchfield Beach, which is not terribly far from Myrtle Beach, northeastern South Carolina. It was very early on this morning. You can see the wind there, pretty much what you would expect with a tropical storm. It had 50-mile-per-hour wind, 50, at the time that it made landfall. And again, that was at about 4 a.m. Eastern on Sunday morning. Now, the last advisory has been put out by the National Hurricane Center. We're seeing some wind gusts still on the order of 20 to 30 miles an hour, so the storm is dying pretty quickly. But the northwest side of this storm has been pretty feisty. We had a couple tornadoes. There was one tornado much earlier, closer to the time that it made landfall. That was not far from Wilmington, a little bit on the northeast side. That was an EF0. It was a brief spin up, as we will very often see with tropical systems making landfall. And then we had one that was west of Raleigh that was confirmed not only by radar, but there was an airport that was reporting that they had to clean up some debris from it. And you could actually see some of that debris on radar. Down below me, you see a live look at Raleigh-Durham International Airport. Let's zoom in a little bit here to Raleigh, where they're going to be back in the rain right now. Raleigh actually just right up here on the north side of where that center of low pressure is. When you look at it on the visible satellite, you can really see that it's kind of a disjointed system. It's lost a lot of its strength. Usually things look a lot more kind of circular when you have a well put together tropical system. In this case, you can see the center of low pressure is actually south, a little bit south of where all these thunderstorms are. When the storm is really well put together, all the thunderstorms will be nicely symmetrically wrapped around the middle of the storm. And so, yeah, you can see where the thunderstorms are. That's the right front quadrant, by the way. That's where the worst of the storm usually is. Now, sometimes you have a storm that makes landfall from the west somewhere, then the right front quadrant would be on this side of the storm, the southeast side of it. We see that in the eastern Gulf sometimes. In this case, it made landfall from the southeast to the northwest, so the right front quadrant was kind of this area up here on the northeast side of the storm. So just kind of an interesting thing there. That's where a lot of the thunderstorms have been. There is your report of the tornado. It's actually a couple different reports here. I believe it was the same tornado. I haven't seen a rating on that one yet. Probably going to be low end based on the reports that we've seen. Seems like it was kind of a quick spin up. And it was pretty close to the radar site there, west of Raleigh along Highway 1. We've also had some flooding. That's been something that has been a thing and usually is a thing with a tropical system that's making landfall. Pretty significant flooding, actually, in parts of North Carolina. Most of this west of I-95 here and kind of west of Fayetteville, west of Raleigh. That's where we've seen some of the flooding issues. The top wind reports when it came to this storm, anywhere from about 45 to 55 miles per hour or so. Very well forecast storm once we got the idea that it was going to form off of the southeast coast. There's that live look at Raleigh right now. And you can see the camera's still bouncing around a little bit. Sustained wind at 13 miles an hour. That's probably not going to be enough to cause any significant damage or anything like that. We had a couple thousand people without power much earlier as the storm made landfall, but it is pretty much wrapping up as we speak. Well, we've been talking about Tropical Storm Chantal, the first storm of the season to make U.S. landfall. Happened early on this morning. That's where we find Fox Weather Storm specialist Mike Seidel, one of the best in the business. Listen to his experience.
Tropical Storm Chantal played out just as expected. It made landfall early this morning, just after 4 a.m., just south of here at Litchfield Beach. The highest wind reported so far was a gust of 56 miles an hour just down the coast in Myrtle Beach at Springmaid Pier. And rainfall totals generally 1 to 3 inches. Now, flood watches continue into this evening here in the coastal communities around Myrtle Beach and Wilmington. But inland, we have flood watches up for the Raleigh-Durham area, Chapel Hill to Fayetteville. That's because what's left of Chantal is moving inland with rainfall totals in the same area, generally 1 to 3 inches. Let me take you back to about 2:30 to 3 a.m. this morning and look at the wind, look at the sand on the beach. Granted, It's pitch black, but you get a sense of how strong those winds were, sustained at about 40 miles an hour. This is right after we had that gust up of 50 miles an hour down at Spring Bay Pier. And heavy rainfalls in the area, especially right before sunrise when the core went right over us. Now the winds have shifted to the southwest, but with the configuration of the coast here, that's an onshore wind. Look at the surf. Boy, it is up as the tide continues to go out. We had no issues with high tide earlier this morning at around 4:30, but a dangerous day, and the lifeguards are up with the red flags, and they're going to keep people, as they told me earlier, knee deep. That's it. But as you can see, a very quiet late morning on the coast here in North Myrtle Beach. The other impact, minimal power outages. Highest I saw through the morning hours, just under 2,000 in South Carolina and just under 1,000 in North Carolina. In North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, I'm Fox meteorologist Mike Seidel.